All right, good evening, everyone. Tuesday, March 19th, 2024. We'll begin this evening with a few workshop items. The first workshop item this evening is the Downtown Gateway Project. Emily, do you want to introduce that?
Sure, I'll introduce it, and then I'm going to ask Pat Fox, who's here from Public Works, to speak about it as well. But an overview is city staff from Public Works, Planning, Economic Development, and City Administration have all been looking at the options for what our gateway area looks like coming from Biddeford into Saco, especially with the development of the Saco Island East parcel that's been under construction for a little bit of time. And with the transportation improvements on the other side of the bridge and the Biddeford side, we're really taking a hard look at what that area could be and what potential it could have. And so I'm going to ask Pat to kind of go into a little more detail on what we've discussed internally.
Thanks, Emily. Pat Fox, Public Works Director. I'll give you a brief overview, and this can be as short or long an item as you would like. But the background is it's been long stated that we should improve the gateway treatment as you come across the bridge from Biddeford into Saco and up the hill by the transportation center and into Pepperell Square. Make that a little more inviting, welcome to Saco, kind of give it a look that it just kind of hasn't had. So it's been talked about for decades, but it never really came about. It's never been clear whether we could get the traffic signal at run-of-the-mill actually turned on and meet the state requirements to do so. That's why it's been flashing for over a decade. The Saco Island East project brought that back about and brought those conversations about. But at the time you approved that project as a board, really that gateway project hadn't been, you weren't brought anything by, say, city staff or anything to say, let's do this as a gateway treatment. But since that project's approval and since Biddeford installed traffic signals, that makes the ability for that to be fully signalized and turned on because it's going to be coordinated with the Biddeford signals, which was something we were missing before. So that checks enough boxes to meet the requirements at the state level. Otherwise, Saco Island East was just going to have some flashing rapid beacons, not a great crosswalk given the hill and the curve and everything else. So this will be much safer. And that got us looking at, is their off-site requirement put on them by this board that had been discussed a long time before that was just to put a sidewalk up both sides of the street so that anyone on the Saco Island East side could get up to Pepperell Square. But the more they got into that off-site design, that was the general requirement of theirs. The more they got into that off-site design, the more we realized it was very costly. They were going to have to build a wall into the hill, the sidewalk, drainage improvements. So Joe Laveria, our city engineer, and a few other staff members just started sort of doodling on what would a complete street, what would bike lanes, what would traffic calming islands, what would something appealing look like if you were to take and repurpose the Saco Island East offsite improvement money and take that money and put it towards a treatment of the whole corridor. So we've come up with a sort of phased approach design that Emily had attached to the memo. So this is kind of rudimentary. It's just sort of a cut and paste of the Saco Island East condos and the green areas and so the orange areas would be bike lanes that we could add up York Hill, reduced to one travel lane instead of essentially two travel lanes because we have a turn lane that just extends for 1,000 feet or whatnot up to Water Street. This would just make people travel in one lane and then move over into safe, protected turn pockets to get into the transportation center, to turn into run-of-the-mill. I think a real pleasing improvement to the whole corridor. And part of this is to repurpose that sort of second sidewalk because now if there's a traffic signal, there's no destinations on that side of Main Street. There's a CMP substation. It's never probably in our lifetimes going to be anything but that. So there's not a reason to extend sidewalk and walls and structural components if we have a traffic signal where we can safely bring the pedestrians across to the side of the run-of-the-mill. That way they're not going halfway up the hill either and deciding to cut across 4 lanes of traffic to get to the transportation center. So this has all modes of transportation, checks all the boxes for what's happening across the region, and allows us to leverage those funds against funds that we'll be putting in the city capital plan to do this in a phased approach and get the traffic signal turned on, get traffic islands added for beautification and traffic calming, possibly do like a tiered landscaped look along that whole slope that's just kind of been overgrown on the substation side, while also improving, we would still improve the lighting, the drainage, and then we could take some of that new sidewalk money and put it into the condition and repair of the existing sidewalk that we would enhance. So that's kind of the goal. Part of bringing it to you is for your feedback on the general concept, but also to recognize that that project, if we move this forward, we come to agreements with the developer on contributions and whatnot, it would have to come back for a site plan amendment because you did put an off-site improvement on. So before we go too far down that road, we wanted to see how the board felt about repurposing that off-site improvement into something that we felt was maybe a little more in line with the future look we've all been looking for.
And I'll just add here that we really tried to consider the comprehensive plan and some of the requests that we've received for a greater bikeability in the area, and figuring out how Biddeford and Saco can work together along this corridor. So we had all those things in mind when we put this together, and Joe Laverio did this concept for us.
All right, thank you. Planning board members, any thoughts or questions? Rob?
Yeah, I got a couple. So I think I heard you say that the developer would probably be participating in the improvements since we're not going to require them to build that sidewalk to nowhere up the right-hand side? Is it up the hill?
Yeah, the idea,
I mean, that would have obviously been a huge expense for them that we were requiring them as part of that.
yeah. So what we're trying to do is just, that was in partial design. So we're trying to see that through to arrive at a dollar value and have the same exact dollar value transfer over to this project. So there's not a,
Right.
it's, you know, for anyone who followed that or saw it as, I mean, it's not, this is just a dollar for dollar transfer to a different project, essentially.
Right. What is the current travel lane width going up that street now?
Right now, I believe you have, so what's nice is if we repurpose and restripe to sort of today's standards to slow people down a little bit, but still accommodate all the different size vehicles. I think right now you have 12, 13-foot travel lanes, maybe a 1 or 2 foot shoulder, which isn't enough for a bike, especially against a curb line. So if we bring all the lanes down to 11 feet, which we've done on sections of North Street that we've redone, it's not too narrow, it's still accommodating. I think the minimum is 10. So if we go all 11-foot lanes, we gain the 5-foot bike lanes on either side.
Right, because you're going from 4 lanes down to 3 in essence, because you've got 1 up, 1 down, and then the turn lane in the middle.
Yep. And places where we don't need the turn pocket, we'll do landscaped, or some of them will be too narrow to landscape. So it'll be a raised island or a color stamped concrete or something. We haven't come up with the
Yeah, that
design.
was my next question. For the wide space, I understand obviously those skinny ones are going to be a few feet wide and you can't do anything with those, but there's several spots I noticed that are significantly wider that you could put some landscaping there.
Yeah.
Who owns the landscape, the area that you've identified as landscape? Is that CMP or is that the Saco Island East? Or
I would
is it
say it's a combination of
easement of the city?
just within the city right of way along the front face of it.
Yeah.
And then as we extend back, we'd have to get easements and permissions from Saco Island East and
CMP.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they really would not worry much because they're not going to expand that substation anyways, that I could see certainly into that.
No, it's pretty much an area that we have done roadside or
Yeah.
slope mowing just to keep it kind of under control, but not in any sort of beautification sense because
Right.
we don't own it, but we have maintained and mowed it. So I don't see how far back that landscape area goes will depend on future permissions of the landowners, but
Yeah, to me, it just seems like a great spot to put some kind of entry sign, art, letters SACO or something like that in very large letters just to be kind of, as you turn that corner, it's like you said, welcome to Saco, right? Versus, look at
I
the,
was thinking shrubs, but I know you want to, we'll think bigger.
well, amongst the shrubs, right? Something, actually, you wouldn't have to maintain them. So, and hopefully people wouldn't be wiping it out like the former sign that we used to have at the bottom of the hill that got took out every couple of years. So, all right, that's all I've got.
Thank you, Rob. Jeff?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I had noted that I thought the new lane description was very positive, particularly for the alignment of the signalized intersections. And there's obviously been an ongoing abuse of that turn lane. Like you say, it's a 1,000-foot turn lane heading northbound, particularly when trains are blocking the intersection. People will come across the bridge and literally drive that entire lane until they can get either the transportation center or wait to cross onto Water Street. And I think these calming islands, pockets, if you will be helpful to try to mitigate some of that, because it's an increased hazard when you have cars that are stopped and people that might be trying to cross. Obviously, working with the comprehensive plan, the bike lanes are kind of a priority within the city right now, and that kind of makes use of the space. It does raise a little bit of a question for me, for functionality, my question was, will there be a signalization for the bike lane or signage that indicate they must obey traffic laws when they hit that, especially at the run-of-the-mill, right? Because now they're going to have some momentum, and we now need that signalization to safely get pedestrians across the road, right? We're going to let them come from the Island East condo complex and cross to the sidewalk. So, or have maybe the police department offer, if they give some bite to actually cite these people if they do violate the traffic laws. That was kind of my one thought.
Yep. I think on that downhill approach, I mean, bikes would be carrying a significant amount of speed, especially if they had no intention of following the signal. So there are additional, we haven't gone as far because we haven't had the bike volume at some of our signals to add some of the electronic components you can, but we certainly could. At a minimum, some signs, if not electronic controls to encourage stopping. But.
My second question, continuing with the bike lane, is what happens to the bike lane after crossing the bridge into Biddeford? So here we are, and I know we have to be limited, and this is going to be a stepped process, but we're going to create these two nice bike lanes for 1,500 feet of roadway in Saco, and they're going to get to Biddeford, and Biddeford's new signalization has no provisions. We're pretty much going to dump them into a median that merges into the curb. So that was kind of just a thought, right? It's kind of not our issue. We're trying to meet our goals, but maybe some signage too that says, caution, bikes must now use travel lane. And
So we'll coordinate that, and we'll make sure that it tapers correctly into the Biddeford side. It won't just be a dumping, or there'll be signage, there'll be something. It's just, this is conceptual for this primary area, but it's a good question.
And we are, I mean, not that we don't sit at the table with Biddeford often, but we are at the regional level. There's a regional complete street policy that gives you the tools of what works and what doesn't and what the lane widths should be. And the idea of having a regional policy is to make it more continuity across city boundaries, so bikes don't all of a sudden go into the wild, wild west as they cross into some other community and they're weaving in and out of cars. So a lot's being done to kind of coincide with the timing of this, I think, on the regional level as well. So
then some of the other thoughts that I had is, the medians and the turn pockets, we're going to add enhanced functionality of the signalization. But when the trains come, do you feel like the coordination of signals between Biddeford and Saco will offer enough queuing while we're dealing with the train that's crossing? Or has there ever been any discussion, I know it's a total different entity, to possibly extending the deck at the train station and just getting the trains to be able to queue completely out of the road and not have to hold up traffic while they're loading and unloading passengers?
You're hitting a lot of ongoing conversations that, but we've talked, for the Downeaster, it's simply them loading on a different car because they can clear the tracks with the train. And also they've done some signal upgrades and they have some more to go to make sure that as soon as the train does clear, it actually reactivates traffic and opens lots of times you'll see that, especially different types of trains, and I guess they have different internal equipment that triggers different things within their system. It just doesn't always put the gates back up. But we are going to bring Pepperell Square signal into the coordination because Pepperell Square is already tied to the railroad actuation. So if we can bring that into play, then we can bring that electronic feedback down to the run-of-the-mill signal and the Biddeford signal. So it'll all be a coordinated system, and there's a lot happening with what you can do with those electronic systems too.
Well, hopefully we can get it so that the one at Pepperell Square is not queuing that an emergency vehicle is coming when the train's there, because that can be a little bit of a mixed signal for those who are paying attention. One more question I had was the deliveries for Factory Island, the run-of-the-mill area. That tends to be a particularly challenging situation for everyone, right? The property owners, the delivery drivers. I know we had that kind of delivery lane that's on the southbound side of the road. Doesn't appear like they always use it. I'm not sure if it's a functionality or travel lane. Sometimes they're backing in or driving the wrong way down to the public parking area. Has there been any suggestions on how to try to minimize their possible impact on traffic with these improvements?
There's actually a note that says maintain loading area, and you can't really tell by the way the aerial shows on the memo, but that was actually pointing at that. We were going to get rid of that lane because it just seemed like extra pavement that could be repurposed or landscaped, until we sort of talked to some businesses and realized that some of their deliveries have to pull over and then take dollies from out there. I mean, like you'd see in any urban environment, but the delivery trucks can't pull into, say, where Saco Island Deli, the upper tier of the island. They can't pull into that entrance and maneuver and get back out without going all the way back down through the condo parking and stuff. So we're going to try to maintain something there that gets them out of the through travel lanes. It's just going to be tricky to keep them out of the bike lane 100%, but at least it is infrequent, and we will probably maintain it just for that reason. We're lucky that we kind of caught that before we get into final design and build out of how much the businesses do use it.
And then the final thing, I kind of touch base with Mr. Biggs, is I thought that marked landscape area was a great opportunity for some nice signage that, welcome to historic downtown Saco, just kind of it's the gateway to our city. I was leaning towards something maybe a little more substantial as far as hardscape or brick, something that doesn't involve a lot of maintenance, maybe some low-lying plants, but a nice sign or hardscape, or because it's very steep. It's very steep. It'd be difficult for your staff to be there maintaining it on any sort of regular basis, and but something permanent that wouldn't take a lot of attention, I think, would be helpful.
Okay.
So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Rob?
Yeah, just one other, when you re-signal, when these new lights go in, or the blinking lights suddenly stop blinking and start working, is it going to improve the traffic through the Biddeford light? Because right now, the Biddeford light seems to have, from my observations as well as my wife's consternation, that it seems to have gotten worse trying to get through there with the wonderful light. So by having these two connected, that maybe improve flow, you think?
What you get out of the coordinated signals is you platoon traffic. So when you start at one light, you get 3 green lights in a row is the idea.
Yeah.
So that you're not losing that downtime of starting and stopping the traffic flow. So you wait longer at the first light, but you don't wait at the second and third light at all. That's about the most we won't.
You can hope for?
Adding another signal will likely not improve the functionality of that one in Biddeford.
Thank you, Rob. Joyce, any thoughts?
I think everything's been said. I do travel that area enough to appreciate trying to rein in some of the chaos going up and downhill, because especially going downhill, so many people try to pass you on the right going past run-of-the-mill and suddenly realize there's no more traffic lane. So having well-marked single-lane traffic, I think, will improve things considerably. So, yeah, I think this is wonderful. And I would think, too, the savings, not just the sidewalk construction, but we won't have to have the flashing beacon anymore. I assume Saco Island East developer was paying for that, too.
Yeah, it was actually written, so it's written in their approval what they own and don't own to get that signal back up. So unfortunately, you're going to see essentially a brand new signal go in, because even the angles, the locations, the length of the mast arm, the number of lights, all the requirements have changed over the last decade, and what's most effective there. So you're going to pretty much see a new traffic signal go in.
But a working traffic signal.
But one that actually, yes, day one gets turned on and has green and red lights instead of just yellow ones. Yeah.
Jeff?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just one final question. As we look at these medians and traffic pockets, are you kind of always envisioning something that's very low profile, just tactile, kind of make a little noise so that your winter maintenance is much easier? We don't want to be incurring a ton of additional labor and time trying to remove snow from this hill. Is it going to be something that would be relatively simple for your staff to continue to maintain long-term in the winter months?
It's always a balance. My plow drivers are not going to love that I'm standing here showing islands in the middle of the hill, that they're used to driving 2 vehicles wide or a loader with its gear all spread all the way out in the middle of the night when there's no cars on it. When you add these center obstructions, it adds, it adds time and it adds extra work, but I think the traffic calming benefits, I think my staff fully realizes that it's worth it and that we need to help the general public drive safer, and this is one way to do it.
Thank you. Jim, any thoughts?
No questions, no.
Yeah, no, I agree with a lot myself that's been said here. This is a welcomed improvement to the area. Our board members here brought up some good points. Downhill speed of bicycle traffic, that was a concern of mine as well. But I think overall it'd be a great improvement to that area. I guess in some of this layout and the design, has there, I guess keeping in the back of the mind, I'm not sure where the bridge is, if there's still any discussions about the bridge and how that connects to this area and how the pedestrian flow works. I don't see any problems per se with it right this moment, but just sort of that additional pedestrian flow and flexibility. It's a good opportunity to incorporate anything we can or need to there, but
Yeah, I think that's part of the benefit of keeping all the pedestrian infrastructure on one side of the road so that we can enhance it as much as we can and get more bang for the buck.
Yeah.
Because you will have that added flow. It'll be coming from behind the transportation center, so it won't really be in anything you see in this photo. But letting that additional flow kind of get into here is going to be a lot easier if we're maintaining one larger, wider, better built sidewalk on one side of the road than having people cross the road at inopportune places.
Yeah, I think this is good. It's going to keep people from sort of hammered down once they get over those tracks and down and around the corner and into Biddeford. So I think this is nice. Rob?
One last question. Who owns the bridge? Biddeford, Saco, is it right in the middle? We cut it apart?
The state of Maine.
State of Maine, all right.
But
I'm thinking another bridge.
You won't have to explore these quite as much in the future because we're moving on that transportation master plan. So this is the type of thing we want to get to, at least this level of sort of design and concept all over the city in the transportation master plan, so that when you have projects, you don't have to get into some of those off-site improvements, sort of language and requirements and hone in on things. You can just sort of, they will be contributing to items like this right from the get-go versus trying to come up with the exact parameters. So this one's happening a little bit in reverse, but in the future we'll be working off the transportation master plan, so you'll have that when you approve projects.
Yeah, this is the calming of the traffic, the slowing down. It's going to help the pedestrian walkability. It'll be nice.
Well, I'm hearing all positive, so city staff takeaway would be that we'll just continue
going.
working with finalizing that transfer of funds over to a city-driven project that has a larger scope and phase it in as we can through the city's capital plan.
Change the landscape area to hardscape area and you don't have to deal with plants. There you go.
Sounds DPW-ish
Yeah,
right there.
There you go.
We want some plants in there. We want some color. Thank you, Jeff. All right, our second workshop item this evening is a sketch plan review at 191 Bradley Street. The applicant is Bradley Greens LLC, and the sketch plan to discuss is a 32-unit residential condominium. Do you want to introduce this one as well, Emily?
Yes, thank you. Before I get into introducing this, I do have to just apologize to members of the public. We realized that we had a saving error. It was actually brought to our attention by a resident, so thank you to Kelly Archer for notifying us of that. And we amended the packet Monday morning to include the missing materials. We are still looking into why we had a saving error, and we will make sure that we clear up our processes going forward. We thought we had amended that and gotten it all set Monday afternoon, but then today, we see there might be another saving issue we had with the packet link. So we will report back to the board in the future, but I do want to thank our resident here for bringing that forward, and we amended it right away. So just going forward here to make sure that you have the full packet, it's the one that is on the website now, and it includes not only the memo, but the other materials in there. This application is from Bradley Greens LLC. It's for a 32-unit residential condo development across 16 duplexes to establish market rate housing with associated site improvements. It's on a portion of property off 191 Bradley Street. It's approximately 6.1 acres in the medium-density MDR zoning district where a multifamily residential project is a conditional use. Going forward, if this is brought through review process, it would require subdivision, site plan, and conditional use review. We have some departmental comments. We also have some discussion items for the board, and we've shared a photo of what it looks like on Google Earth now, and then the proposal going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. The applicant, I trust, is here and would like to give a brief presentation.
Thank you. I'm David Aronstam, a part of Bradley Greens LLC, and what I thought I'd do is just give you a brief overview of what our idea is around the project, and then I'll let Chris Taylor from Saco Techniques talk about the specifics and the engineering that we've done to date. So Bradley Greens LLC is a small LLC. It's owned by two entities. It's owned by my construction company, CityView Construction, and by Scammon Development. And it's really essentially myself and my son, we own a small construction company. We build houses here in Saco. We're currently renovating a house on Glenhaven Circle. We did houses out on Ruby Road. We've done houses down in Kennebunk. We've done a number of them. And I am a retired teacher from Thornton Academy. Over the years, we have done business and built houses for Linda Valentino. And literally, when we lived on the Boom Road, she lived just down the street from us. And she essentially sold a lot of the houses that we built. Not too long ago, Linda called me and said there may be a chance that some property is coming up for sale by the Greek church. Would you be interested in doing a project with us in building a neighborhood there? I kind of jumped at the chance for two reasons. One is I remember the property when my son, who he reminded me tonight is 34, I remember when he was a little boy, we used to practice Little League there. And so I knew the property really well. I coached Little League here in town. We used to practice on those fields many, many years, many, many afternoons. And currently, I live literally about a tenth of a mile away. So my wife and I walk by the property all the time. So I said to Linda, yeah, I would really love the chance to see if we can put something together, create some sort of neighborhood, kind of like the neighborhood where I currently live now. So we put together an LLC. We made an offer to purchase the land, and thankfully, the Gilberts said yes, and so we purchased the land. What we'd like to do, and what you'll see tonight, is what we'd like to do is build a neighborhood, and a neighborhood that not only we can be proud of, but also the city would be proud of, and most of the residents would be happy too. One of the things that makes me especially happy today is when I go see a customer, and the customer smiles and is very happy and talks to me about the house that I built for them, and how happy they are that they live in the house that they live in, and the process that we went through. And we'd like to continue that process in these 16 duplexes. So you'll see tonight the sketch plan that we put together. We've tried to do things that are conducive to the neighborhood. We've tried to do things that would be pleasing to the eye and also pleasing to the people who would essentially move into these homes. We also wanted to make sure, it was important to us that when we purchased the land, that we did something to honor the Gilberts. So we've decided, like early on, like one of the first things we decided was to name the little cul-de-sac that we're going to create Gilbert Way, so in honor of the Gilberts. So we'll do that. But the other thing that was also really important to us was to go to somebody like Saco Techniques to figure out from an engineering standpoint exactly what kind of units could we put in. We wanted to put in units where families could either move in, or we've had a lot of people talk to us about, literally we're doing a project now for somebody where the parents and the children are buying a lot, not in Bradley Greens, but somewhere else, they're buying a lot. We're putting two houses together with some garages in the middle. So it's not inconceivable to me that if we do a good job on these duplexes, that there will be families that move in, 2 generations of families that move into them. So the long and the short of it is, this is the beginning. And what we'd like to do is, we've talked to the planning department and the code enforcement people. We'd like to start talking to the planning board and get your feedback on our ideas. And then it's our intention to take those ideas, take whatever information that we gather, and then create a project, create a neighborhood that, as I said, that both we and the city would be proud to have. So thank you, and I'm going to introduce Chris Taylor.
Thank you.
Hello, Chris Taylor with Sebago Technics, professional engineer for the project. I'll keep this brief, but just wanted to give a little rundown of some more specifics on the project and kind of answer some of the questions that were brought up in the comments by city staff. For the units, we're kind of proposing a single driveway off of Bradley Street with a loop towards the end, kind of a oversized cul-de-sac or circle. Provides pretty good circulation through the site. Truck turning movements and emergency vehicle movements through the site are kind of help out with that loop. Each unit would have a single car garage with 1 parking space in the garage, 1 parking space outside in the driveway. We'd also provide some additional guest parking that's required as part of the multifamily requirements in the zoning ordinance. There'd also be a community gang-style mailbox, where our thought right now is to put it kind of at the intersection where the circle closes back in on itself. Trash pickup is intended to be private trash pickup by Casella, and each unit would have its own pickup right at the curbside. The development would be serviced by public water and sewer that comes from Bradley Street. And we're working right now to kind of work through stormwater requirements and treatment, looking at the existing drainage paths and trying to maintain those as much as possible. We've included a trip generation memorandum with the sketch plan application that you guys can see. The traffic generation is pretty minimal for these 32 units. I know you recently have looked at a much larger subdivision off of Bradley Street and Lincoln Street. So we kind of look at that and just their models and kind of adjust them as needed from there. So that'll open up to any questions. Turn it back.
Thank you. Board members, any immediate thoughts, questions? Jim?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the questions I had was regarding the, I guess you call it the guest parking. I couldn't see where on the sketch that would be.
So it's not located on the sketch plan application, but we do intend to add it when we come back for a full site plan review, subdivision, conditional use permit.
And you've received some comments from city staff or departments. Have any of those comments caused you any problems with the way you're proposing to develop the site?
No, I mean, I think the comments are pretty general in nature right now, given the sketch plan and given the level of the drawing itself and level of design. So nothing really was too shocking or, all within the ordinance and kind of what we expected to go work through the process.
Okay, that's all. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jim. Any other board members? Jeff?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I had first of all, the initial impression was, I think it fits really well with the area. I had the opportunity to live in Canterbury West for a few years, and these sort of developments do I think work very well. But with that experience, one of my questions was your proposed dumpster location, but now you're saying it'd be private curbside. So if it's private curbside, are you going to have a space designated for an automated truck to reverse direction within? That's something I think I'd like to see on the final plan. The next thing was snow removal. There's a lot of shrubbery, which is great because we create that privacy, that feel. Do you have a plan for how snow removal is going to take place in this condominium association for both the road surface as well as the driveway areas? Area lighting, obviously, is something we like to look at as you get further along. And kind of playing on one of the staff reviews, there's no interior sidewalks that are shown or proposed at this point. These little cul-de-sacs often are great places to walk. When they're walking on Bradley Street and pulling into some of these is typically, I think, desired by a lot of people who are out exercising. And we've heard comments just a couple weeks ago, like Hillview Heights, great little area, but it was older. There are no sidewalks, so people are walking in the streets. Just wondering what your thoughts were with regards to possibly meeting the compliance of interior sidewalks. The stormwater drainage plant, looks like you might have a little area kind of set aside immediately when you drive in on the right. I couldn't really see any details, but obviously that's further around. And then my final one was visitor and guest parking, which maybe you'll combine some of those concerned areas for the snow plowing and the guest parking and make it all fit. But those are things that I'd be interested in the future. But as a whole, I think it is a really cohesive layout with the existing neighborhood and could be a great addition to that area. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Rob, sure.
Jeff and I think a lot alike, because my list is almost verbatim. But I do have, what would be the planned street width for this cul-de-sac? And is it going to have space for on-street parking? And it comes to the concern of visitor parking. You've got 32 units and it's Super Bowl Sunday, and you've got people coming to my house, and Jeff's house is 4 doors down. Where are we all going to park cars? Because we can't park on Bradley and walk in. And then the other one was, so that would be, could street width handle some of that? And then the other one was, as Jeff said, sidewalks. I think it would be required to have a sidewalk that would enter in, not both sides, but one side and do the loop around kind of thing, for the residents as well, not just for people walking on Bradley wanting to do a little loop around, but for the residents there just to, you get kids going out. I'm assuming there's going to be a bus stop if this starts to fill up, or there'll be one somewhere there. So I think that would be probably something that would be pretty good idea. Yeah, snow storage. What is that little rectangle down in the lower corner for? Is there a reason for that?
Oh, that was,
That we're going to put the IKEA or something like that, build that?
it was a spot that we were holding for stormwater
Okay.
before, and when we developed this plan and submitted it,
Right, for
it was just an initial
a
thought.
detention pond.
Yeah, we've
Yeah.
kind of looked at it in a little bit more detail. That location is probably going to change, and
And that's fine.
not
You're a long way, you've got an evolutionary process.
Yeah.
And you're just started.
But we did want to hold some space for stormwater and
Okay.
acknowledge that was going to take up some space.
Yeah, I think that's it between us. Jeff, questions in the city with regards to postal boxes, and, yeah, the visitor parking's an issue that it worries me a lot. But anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob. Joyce, any thoughts?
I don't have any questions other than what's already been asked and answered.
All right, thank you. Yeah, Rob and Jeff, you hit 60% of the notes I had as well. A few of the other items I had was relationships between the curb cut here and across the street, sort of understanding its relationship to the rest of that particular area. Landscaping, screening, I see there's some thought put on paper right now, so that's good. I'd like to see that, how that develops. Understanding HVAC equipment and screening, where that's going to live. As we know, heat pumps are getting more popular and they make noise, so we just want to pay particular attention to their location. We talked about stormwater, snow storage. If I'm sure you're familiar, we've had many discussions about traffic in this particular area. So I'd be interested to see more information on traffic. I think it was noted in there 194 trips of 200 before it hits the additional study. I'd be interested to know more about traffic. There's going to be much discussion on that, I'm sure, if this continues to move forward. But other than that, there's the same thoughts as Jeff and Rob, but that's all I had. Any other thoughts?
Are we thinking about a site plan at some point, or is that premature, given the fact that this is only sketch plan?
You mean as far as reviewing the project?
A site walk?
Oh, a
sorry.
site walk. Yes, as the project develops, I would be interested in walking that area. Sure. Yep. All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Tuesday, March 19th, 2024 Saco Planning Board meeting. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed members of the Planning Board and valued community representatives, I welcome you all to this evening's assembly of the Saco Planning Board. As chairman, it is my privilege to convene this gathering dedicated to the thoughtful planning and development to our community. Today, we come together with shared commitment to shaping the future of our city in a manner that reflects our values, respects our heritage, and fulfills the needs of our residents both now and in the future. Our agenda tonight contains important matters, each requiring our careful consideration, expertise, and collaboration. From zoning ordinances to development proposals, from infrastructure to environmental concerns, every item in our agenda holds significance in sculpting the landscape and character of our community. As we engage in our deliberations, let us remember the profound impact these decisions will have on the lives of all, keeping in mind we are residents like you. It is our duty to maintain transparency, fairness, and inclusivity in our proceedings, ensuring that the voices of all are heard and respected. Today, we must embrace the responsibility entrusted to us by our community, working diligently and thoughtfully to chart a course that fosters growth, prosperity, and harmony. With that, I would like to call this meeting of the Saco Planning Board to order. I look forward to the productive discussions and meaningful outcomes that lie ahead. Thank you. This evening with us, we have myself, Matt Provenzo, the chair. To my left, Joyce Leary Clark, our vice chair. And to her left, Jeff Bruchot and Rob Biggs. And to my right, Jim Molier. With us this evening as well, we have our city staff, Emily Cole-Prescott and Lisa Harmon. We are missing this evening our city council liaison and a few planning board members. With that, our first agenda of the evening is the approval of the March 5th, 2024 minutes. As Emily mentioned earlier, we've had a little bit of IT hurdles. I know there's been a little bit of trouble accessing that agenda, or excuse me, the meeting minutes from some of the board members. I guess, board members, those that have read the minutes or have access to them. I guess I unfortunately have not been able to put eyes on that, but I would like your opinion and direction on any potential comments or edits that we have to make, or we could table that item to another meeting.
Matt, I'm actually accessing the agenda from the city website, and I don't see the minutes on the website. So
Yeah, that's,
I'm wondering if we should table until we all have a chance to review and they're part of the packet.
I think that's fine.
Yeah, I would move to table the minutes of March 5th, 2024 till our next meeting.
All right.
I'll
Thank you.
second.
Thank you, Rob and Jeff. Those in favor? Jim?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
I would vote yes as well. So we'll table the minutes to the next planning board meeting. With that, our next item, we have a few application reviews and public hearings. Moving on, we have a continued application in review and a public hearing. This is for Mammoth Enterprises, represented by Oak Point Associates. This is a site plan review for the creation of a hotel motel expansion to support seasonal workforce housing at 46 Ocean Park Road, map 34, lots 11 and 12 in the Highway Business Zoning District. Do you want to give us a brief update on that, Emily?
Sure. So at the last meeting, the application was found complete. The applicant had responded to recent comments they received. There were a few remaining comments to be addressed as we move forward. They're in the meeting packet. Just a recap on February 20th is when the board found the application complete, scheduled the hearing for this evening's meeting. And then on April 4th last year, the board saw this initial proposal and workshop. So we have recent comments there. And then we did do the noticing for the public hearing as we put on the next page. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Was there a motion, or excuse me, a waiver on that evening as well?
So there is a question on a parking waiver relative to the discussion, if you look in that category there, and the board is asked to look at that relative to section 230-1001D.
All right, thank you. Any update from the applicant? Jeff?
Just wanted to let you know I'll be recusing myself of this topic as the applicant's within the 6th degree. So.
Okay, thank you, Jeff.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
I'm Jack Gagnon with Oak Point Associates, civil engineer. And since we saw you last, we did submit some revised plans to address many of the comments that we had received in the past. The revised plans clarified the number of bedrooms. There are 2 bedrooms. Actually, in the new units, there are 1 bedroom. In many of the existing cabins, there are 2 bedrooms, but each cabin does house 4 people. The existing dumpster was relocated as recommended by the Public Works, or city engineer, I should say. Building numbers were added, however, there was a little cross-communication between myself and the Public Safety Department, and they furnished a plan after I had resubmitted the plans that doesn't match what I have, but we're willing to renumber it according to what the Public Safety had recommended. We reoriented several buildings to match the floor plan layout and basically turning them 90 degrees so it matched better. There are a few that will have to be modified, and that's noted on the plans as well. We added some phasing notes. This project will be phased probably over a course of 3 years, maybe starting next fall. we added some notes for the condition of approval for the parking waiver to be non-transferable. Added a note to require as a condition of approval to sidewalk impact fee would need to be paid before a building permit. We added some additional street trees as recommended by Parks and Rec. And the existing sewer pump station will be replaced in accordance with City of Saco private pump station standards, which are currently under development. And we've been working with Water Resource Recovery Department as well as their consultant who's developing those standards. And we have a pretty good understanding what they are, but they aren't in writing quite yet. So it was agreed that we would provide a detailed details of the pump station as a condition of approval when those standards are available. Some of the items that will be required for the pump station include a maintenance contract, service and maintenance contract with a pump installer, pump station installer, and it would be, the alarm would go to that maintenance entity, and they'd be reviewed by the city before it's approved to be constructed. Notes have been added to the utility plan as well to require Maine Water to approve engineered plans to cross the road. I've spoken with the water company, and they're fine with having that done as after the fact. And we did add a note to the utility plan that electric upgrades may be necessary to support the additional cabins. We provided a turning movement diagram for the emergency vehicle to be able to turn around on site. And most of these items here are repeats. Yeah, so that's a summary of what was changed since you last saw it.
All right, great, thank you. Board members, any immediate questions for the applicant? Jim?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the items being requested, as I understand, it's a parking waiver.
Yes, that's true.
And looking at the city ordinances, section 230-1001D, it appears that there are four determinations the planning board needs to make in order to grant the waiver. Do you see those?
I couldn't speak to all four right
Well,
now.
they're short. I'll read them to you, and then
Thank you.
my purpose is to see if you could help us answer those questions and or at least address those standards so we can determine to grant the parking waiver. The first is the applicant demonstrates that the number of off-street parking spaces is adequate for the proposed use. The second is that on-street parking is available within a reasonable distance. And the third is that off-street parking in public lots is not available. And the fourth is that the granting the waiver would not create excess congestion, hazardous, or unsafe conditions in the neighborhood. So I know we talked about this, I think, at the last meeting, but maybe you could just quickly go through those for us.
Regarding item number one, adequate parking spaces for the proposed use, this is kind of a unique use. This property is being used exclusively for J1 visa students that are working at Funtown Splashtown for the season. The season is from May to mid-September. And these students do not have vehicles, and they're provided transportation to and from the park via vans from that are owned by the park. So we've provided 7 spaces on site, including a handicap space, which is more than enough for the vans, as well as some staff that do some cleaning once in a while. And so that's number 1. Adequate on-street parking really doesn't apply because of our parking demand is so low. And off-street parking is not available. That still doesn't apply because we don't need it. And I'm sorry, the last one was,
Granting the waiver will not create
Okay, yeah.
excess congestion,
Right,
hazardous
that-
or unsafe
yeah,
conditions.
because there's so few vehicle trips, the actual number of vehicle congestion is actually going to go down as a result of this change of use from a motel in the past.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well said.
Thank you, Jim. Any additional questions for the applicant? No? All right, this evening is scheduled as a public hearing. Board members, we can have additional deliberation or discussion, or questions, or we can move to a public hearing.
I'd move to open the public hearing.
I'll second.
Thank you, Joyce and Rob, for the motion. Discussion? Those in favor, Jim?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
I would vote yes as well. So the public hearing is open. If you're here this evening to discuss or speak to this item, please come to the podium, state your name and address. We give individuals 5 minutes to speak. And once we've heard from everyone, we will compile the questions and we'll provide answers either via staff or the applicant. And with that, please, anyone that would like to speak, step forward.
Mr. Chair, not seeing anyone coming forward to speak at the public hearing, I move to close the public hearing.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Joyce and Rob, for this motion. Discussion? Those in favor, Jim?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
I would vote yes as well. Public hearing is closed. All right, board members, Jim asked an appropriate question here regarding the parking waiver. Why don't we start there? Rob?
I think for the way it's laid out and for the use that it's planned to be used for, I don't think there's an issue with the parking. You know, you've got parking for maintenance, you've got parking for vans to show up and pick up employees. It is not going to be used during the winter months. It's, wrote down May through September, so there's not going to be issues with snow removal or anything like that. The only challenge I do have is if this ever, and it would be up to whoever buys this, but if this property were ever changed, and I know that the parking waiver was going to be only for this owner, and should it change hands, it doesn't transfer. So new owner comes in, they want to make some changes, they will either have to tear buildings down or figure out how to put more parking in. But for this use, it makes great sense. I think it works good, and they're maximizing the property. And I know there's always the challenge of where do we put J1 visa students when they can come. Hopefully they can come. We've had some challenges with that during COVID, but I think that it's, in my mind, it's fine the way giving this waiver with this use as is.
Thank you, Rob. Joyce, any thoughts?
I agree, and I'm missing, I understand there was already a provision in the draft conditions of approval addressing the fact that the waiver was not transferable and it was only for this use of the property. Staff might have to help point me in the right direction so that we can just reference the fact that this limitation is in the conditions, proposed conditions.
Mr. Chair, did you want me to address that?
There we go, it's 6C.
Did you say 6C?
Right, in the proposed conditions of approval.
Thank you. Jim?
Mr. Chair, if it's appropriate to do so at this point, I'd move that we grant the parking waiver pursuant to Chapter 230-1001D, as the applicant has met all 4 conditions.
Second.
Thank you, Jim and Joyce, for the motion. Any additional discussion? Those in favor, Jim?
Yes?
Joyce?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
I would vote yes as well. So the waiver is granted for the parking waiver, and we can have additional discussion if need be when we get to the findings and conditions of approval, if we want to make any adjustments to that or any changes. Any other thoughts by board members? Let me see here. Just going through my notes here. I guess maybe for the applicant, I guess one question. I see some comments here from the landscape architect, and I think the date that those comments were received and some of your responses, I wasn't quite sure if all of her comments were captured. Have you had a moment to review her notes there?
I did review those today. They came in the packet just recently, and I knew they were coming, but I did review them. There were really no issues with any of those comments addressing them, if you want to do it as a condition of approval, or I think some of the highlights are that they're concerned that some of the trenching for some of the utilities might affect some of the larger trees, and they wanted us to look at some tree protection zones and have those trees assessed, and if they need to come down as part of the project, we would do so. There are some pretty large pines out there,
Yeah.
and some have, I think at least one has been taken down for safety reasons, but the applicant has had an arborist look at those in the past, and they did not recommend that any additional ones be taken down, but with this additional disturbance, it's certainly a good comment and welcome. We don't want to have any situations where a tree comes down on a cabin or a person, so.
Of course, thank you.
That's a good a good comment. And I think the other comments were that they wanted some additional details for the tree planting to make sure that the proper depths and staking was done for the street trees that we're putting in, and some comments about maintenance of the trees in addition to the turf and so forth. So none of those comments are really an issue for us.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chair, is that the March 14th letter from R.S. Leonard? Is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And the applicant would be fine with making a condition of approval compliance with that March 14th letter from R.S. Leonard?
Yes.
And any other thoughts or comments from board members? Not hearing any. Perhaps a motion. Just briefly, Emily, were there any additional items from staff that are outstanding that we may have missed here?
I don't believe so. We do have like a global respond to any outstanding peer review comments on here, and that would include, you can just say, respond to all outstanding peer and staff review comments, and we'll make sure that they're addressed. There are some outstanding main water comments, which were noted in the memo, and sewer details, which Jack has brought up.
Sure, there's a few items in there to be finalized. Yep.
So we'll just make sure that they would get resolved before pre-con meeting is scheduled.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind me asking, would that draft condition of approval number 3 that's talking about adhering to all outstanding comments, would that encompass the March 14th letter from R.S. Leonard, or should we add that? Okay, because otherwise I would say we could amend 14, which talks about landscaping specifically, but if you feel it's adequately
Yeah, I think
covered under number 3.
I do. The last sentence of 3 also captures the applicant shall respond to outstanding landscape peer review comments, so sort of captured twice there. And then we talked about 6C in confirming that the applicant, 6C states the applicant shall prepare parking waiver detail documentation to submit to the planning board. Review for approval. Once approved, document shall be filed with York County Register of Deeds to notify, any future property owners regarding the waiver. So with that, as a reminder, this is a site plan review under section 179-601. We, this evening, do not have Emily's handy-dandy, what was the term we were using for that, your guidance document?
I have it up on the screen
there
here.
it is. So we can, at the board's will and pleasure, we can go through each item. We can address it how the board sees fit this evening.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I move to adopt the proposed findings of fact, numbers 1 through 9, as provided by city staff.
Thank you for the motion, Joyce.
Second?
Second by Jim, thank you. Any additional discussion? Those in favor? Jim?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
I would vote yes as well. Motion made to adopt the findings of facts as presented. So with that, we have 20 sections and criteria to review here under site plan. Under section 179-601A, 601, we have A through T. And as the board feels appropriate, we can address those individually, or we can address it as one overall finding if the board would like. And we can have additional discussion on any particular item, of course.
Mr. Chairman, I'd recommend, unless there's a particular section that's controversial, or people have questions on it, that we do it as a package, do them all together, rather than each separately.
Thank you, Jim. Is that a motion or discussion?
Yes, I'll make a motion to have all those guidelines reviewed as a package.
I'll second that.
I'll second, okay. So we have a motion to approve the site plan review standards, section 179-601A through T. Would that be accurate, Jim?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, please.
Any additional discussion on that motion? Those in favor, Jim?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
I would vote yes as well. Vote 4-0 to approve the site plan review standards, section 179-601A through T.
And Mr. Chair, I'd move to adopt or approve the draft conditions of approval as presented.
Thank you,
Second.
Joyce. Jim, for the second, thank you. Additional discussion on the conditions of approval? Those in favor, Jim?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
I would vote yes as well. 4-0 to adopt the conditions of approval as presented. So I believe, Emily, please correct me if I'm wrong, we have not addressed yet the section 601 zoning use table. Where was that? That wasn't captured previously, was it?
That was included in 179. So your motion was to approve the application for 179 6.01A through T, and we captured those in section A.
Yes, sorry, I see that now. So with that, board members, perhaps one final all-encompassing motion?
Do we need another?
Or Emily, does that satisfy?
I think you're all set based on what you have here.
Okay,
We'll write up the approval letter,
Okay.
conditional approval letter.
I just wanted to make sure we were all set. Sometimes we hit that all-encompassing. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. I look forward to getting this project going.
Thank you. All right, our next item this evening is for Pine Tree Holdings. BH2M is the authorized agent. This is an amendment to the Park North and the Cascades subdivision. This is to create one new lot for two buildings, one of which is to be built at a later date, one of which is a drive-through and walk-up coffee shop. This is a application for completeness review. Emily, would you like to add anything to that?
Sure, thank you. This first application on your agenda is for a subdivision amendment for a lot line revision. Staff is reviewing this as the 13th amendment. The numbering doesn't really so much matter, although we just want it correctly numbered on the registry. So we have asked the applicant to update that numbering for us. And like Mr. Chair said, it's going to be to support a drive-through with proposed Aroma Joe's and a retail site for the future. But again, this item is for the subdivision amendment alone, and you'll see the subdivision amendment application as well as the site plan review application. Because this is only a lot line revision, we're proposing that this just be reviewed per the ordinance requirement as one item. It doesn't need a preliminary and final for the subdivision review aspect, because there's not a new lot being created in this situation. So tonight, the board's asked to find the application complete. Departmental reviews are included on the site plan review packet materials for the next item directly after this. So these will be reviewed in parallel paths, but they're somewhat separate items.
Thank you, Emily. So this is, that was one of my questions, 13th amendment or 10?
So it's the 13th to the whole Park North and Cascade subdivision. It is probably the applicant had it as the 10th because the last time this particular side of the subdivision came forward, it was labeled the 9th.
Okay, I see. Thank you. All right, applicant, give us a brief presentation.
Walter Pelkey, BH2M. Emily, would you like me to just put this all together, or do we want to just put it together?
Well, I guess that's a question for the board. Do you want me to introduce the site plan and review them somewhat together or separate? We did them separate just so it was clear.
Well, there are two distinct applications, correct?
They are, but they've been proposed somewhat together as a package. We just separated them out because that's how the board's done it in the past.
Yeah, I think a brief description, and I think we have the two, we understand the two applications. I think we understand their connectivity, so.
Okay.
Perhaps for clarity, I think you can
Okay.
explain the intent and the reasoning behind it.
Okay.
And then we can kind of move on to the item after that, but.
The applicant
Sorry,
is-
can I just interrupt? Jeff has rejoined us for the remainder of the evening, just as a note. All right. Thank you.
The applicant tonight is Pine Tree Holdings. In terms of the amended plan, it had been 2 lots previously that the common lot line was previously approved as another use. And when we get to the site plan design, you'll see how we've placed that property line to accommodate the sale of the property for the use that they're going to use it for. The amended plan also revises easements for access, easements that are sort of traded between the two properties, which again, as we move forward, you'll see those entrances, and also utility easements that might conflict, I say conflict, but cross the, onto the lot C5-2, which is the Evolution Athletics property. That's pretty much the gist of the amendment to the plan.
All right, thank you. Any immediate questions from board members?
Mr. Chair?
Jim, yes.
I reviewed the plans pretty closely, trying to understand exactly how you were splitting the lot up. And are you splitting it up so that all of the use that the coffee shop will have includes all the parking? Will its lot include all the parking, or is?
Yes.
I see.
Yep.
So everything on the maps that shows that use and shows parking for that use will be part of the new lot?
That's correct.
I see. All right, thank you. That's the only question I had.
Thank you, Jim. So that's a great question, because it seems 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 or so. Is it true then? So 8 to 10 of the parking spaces and a dumpster enclosure close to Evolution Athletics, is that, how does that come into play? I guess I understood that as part of the project, but not on part of the property, but I guess my understanding is a little bit different than your explanation there.
If you look at where the entrance is to the proposed parking for the Aroma Joe's building, that first entrance to the north, there previously were, I think it was 10 without, just look at the existing conditions plan. There was some previous parking there. It looks like there were
8 or so,
1, 2,
yeah.
3, 4, 5. Yeah. What they've basically done is moved those parking spaces to accommodate to meet the minimum parking required for the gym. It's a little bit of the trade of, we're going to take 8 of your spaces, we'll give you 8 spaces on your property when we finish construction.
And then the dumpster, that's part of the Aroma Joe's and retail
Yes.
project?
Yep.
Okay. So the trade-off, we take 8, we give you 10, but you have to deal with our dumpster enclosure.
That's correct.
I understand. And then briefly, I have 2 preliminary plans here, and it looks like there's some utility access from across the street in sort of 2 trenches, and then there's a version where they're all combined. Is that sort of to be determined, which version?
Well,
that you proceed
it
with?
started out, once we, Maine Water gave us the initial okay to trench across Cascade, but in talking with Emily and Joe, they'd like to use a directional drilling so that we don't disrupt traffic along Cascade. So that, at this point, it's no longer a trench, it's just an area where those 2 lines will be basically drilled under Cascade Road, as not to rip that road up there. The most current plan, Joe had us remove the hatch that sort of misrepresented what was going on there.
I see. Okay. Try not to site plan it right this moment, just understanding which version we're sort of looking at here. Sorry, let me see here. Board
So
members,
if I can just, excuse me, if I can just
Yes.
confirm that I have the right plan up here. I see note 23, proposed water services along Cascade Road shall be installed by directional drilling, and installation shall be approved by Maine Water Company prior to construction. So I think this is the most up-to-date one that's on the screen. There's another one after this. Okay, we'll make sure that's corrected.
All right, thank you, Emily. Any other board members? Questions, thoughts, concerns?
Are you talking about questions, thoughts, and concerns for the division of the lots or the site plan?
For the applicant on determining if the application is complete as presented. I guess I'm trying not to site plan, there's 3 or 4 plans in the packet here, so I just wanted to understand which version we were focusing on and understanding of how the parking is related between what's existing and what's not. So maybe a little bit more, but overall focus of application completeness for the lot line revision is essentially what we're speaking about here.
So, Mr. Chair, if I understand correctly, to determine the application complete in this instance, all we have to find is that the submission that's been made by the applicant, together with all the plans, provides the city sufficient information to be able to review and make sure that the proposal will be presented, will be completed as presented. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so for the subdivision amendment, which is the first one
Yeah.
that you have on your agenda, you're just asked to determine if the application is complete. And yes, you're correct. For subdivision amendments, we don't look to go back and review the entire subdivision. We're really looking to make sure we have enough information to review the lot line revision, so only the section of the subdivision that's being amended.
Well, with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll move to find the application complete.
Thank you, Jim.
Second.
Jeff, thank you for the second. Additional discussion? Those in favor, Jim?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
I would vote yes as well. The board has found the application complete.
With that, Mr. Chair, I move to schedule the public hearing for this subdivision amendment for April 16th, 2024.
Second.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Joyce. Those in favor for scheduling a public hearing on April 16th? Jim?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. I believe that is everything. Yes, Emily?
Yes, for the subdivision amendment piece.
All right, great, thank you. So moving right into the next portion of this project is a site plan review for the creation of Aroma Joe's drive-through coffee shop with a walk-up window, along with a second building to be built at a later time. This is at 6 Cascade Road, tax map 62, lot 1-2. And this again is for an application completeness review, agenda item 4C. Anything to add additionally, Emily, to this item?
No, we took a look at the uses, and this is a use that's allowed in both the Portland Road Zone and Parcel 1 of the Cascade Contract Zone, so we provided that to you there. And on this memo, we have the departmental comments, and then we have peer reviews that are underway, and there'll be more time to answer any questions on those.
Thank you. And Mr. Pelkey, you can, I guess, elaborate a little bit more now
Okay.
on the project here.
The plan that you have in front of you tonight shows a 1,000 square foot Roma Joe's coffee shop, 1,760 square foot retail space, parking associated with both buildings. For the Aroma Joe's, there are 2 order lanes that run parallel with Route 1. There's a third bypass lane that would drive you around the site for deliveries, garbage pickup, someone who just ends up in a lane and needs to get out of the drive-through. The buildings are served with public water. We've got the blessing from Maine Water on that. There's a sanitary sewer stub on site that showed in the easement as part of that amended plan that we'll tie into. Stormwater will be handled on site into a common existing storm drain pipe that is accounted for, and I guess it doesn't mean much, it's detention pond B of part of the Cascades and that subdivision. We were, this site with Evolution Athletics and whatever the additional expansion was going to be here, and it's in the notes. Unfortunately, my plan is too small for me to read it. But there was, they accounted for an amount of impervious surface that we could put into the system that storm drain would handle. We've stayed under that. Access to the site is through the 2 existing curb cuts now through Evolution Athletics, with entrances off of Cascade Road if you're traveling west, entrance off of Route 1 if you're traveling north, and any other direction you're sure to using those internal roadways that's part of the existing subdivision. We've basically been back and forth with staff numerous times to sort of get this thing fine-tuned. We've dealt with the traffic issue. Staff has looked at that. Got the fire chief squared away. We got the sewer squared away. I have a few comments that we got, I guess, Emily, just the last couple of days, a little bit of landscaping that we need to fine-tune on it. But aside from that, I guess this is pretty much your first good hard look at this. But any questions you have, I'd be happy to try and answer them for you.
Great, thank you. Board members, any questions for the applicant? Rob?
Yeah, just for clarification, so to get to this north entrance to the Aroma Joe's maze to start through their process, you're going to be either going through Mapes or Cascade onto Zion and then through Evolution Athletics parking lot?
Yes, or along that Henry Properties, that sort of that intersection, rather than coming the long way through the parking lot, but yes, either way is the idea.
Oh, yeah, you could go take a right on Mapes and then shoot down and
Yes.
then cut through that way.
Yep.
Are they ready for the chain of cars that are going to line up at this place?
I guess.
That's why they have 2 lanes.
Yeah, my daughter actually worked at one of these in New Hampshire, and coffee's not, I love coffee, but I am not waiting that long. It's crazy.
I think that's the beauty of the walk-up window.
Yeah, the problem is I just want black coffee, period, right?
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Jim?
I noticed in the site plan review submission requirements, there's a list of things that an applicant's supposed to provide. There was one note, it said elevation plans for retail building not on file. Is that something that is coming, or?
Yep, we can provide that. What I think is part of this submission was there was a 3D rendering of that building that it shows here. But the elevations, we can get those for you.
That 3D rendering, that's based on concept. You don't know who's coming in there.
No, we don't.
And they may want to change that completely.
Exactly. Well, we're trying to keep the architecture with what's going on there. And
Meaning Evolution's got their block wall and you want to
Yeah.
do something similar and that sort of thing.
well, somewhere between there and the look of the Aroma Joe's building.
But if some sort of a franchise or some other firm comes in that has a consistent look, like Aroma Joe's, you'd have to comply with that, I think, at that point.
Yes.
And this is not really planned, this is just a pad that you're setting aside, you're not building
For now, that will be a green area.
until you, right.
Yep,
But I mean, it's just an empty space until
that's right.
you're going to build all the parking and everything else that goes along with it.
That's correct.
Okay.
Jeff?
While we're on elevations, I was kind of curious as to the Aroma Joe's stand or building, small building, where the mechanicals, we talk about screening of mechanicals, and we only see one side of this. I don't know, they're walking cooler compressors or heat pumps or, well, that's kind of the question is where's their site path going to be?
That the taller elevation, the mechanicals are behind that. Above that.
On the roof?
Yeah, sort of that mezzanine area.
But are they screened from the side? So if you were coming from the north, heading southbound, would you be able to see on that flat roof? And is there some sort of fencing up there or a facade?
If there isn't, we can add it. But that is where those compressors are.
Rob?
Yeah, question on the trash. So that dumpster that's way over in the North 40 here to the right,
Yep.
that's the trash for Aroma Joe's?
That is the one for Evolution Athletics.
That trash dumpster there. Aroma Joe's dumpster is going to be where?
Next to the angled parking. The refuse truck will come around that third lane, pull straight ahead, sort of directly at the end of
Right,
Evolution.
that dumpster there, yeah.
Yes,
That's
that is
for Aroma Joe's usage.
Right, yep.
That's pretty far away. And the reason I say that is, again, having a daughter who at 10 o'clock at night has to walk out to the dumpster by herself, and she's the only one operating that at that time, that'd be kind of scary. Oh, as it is, she's on the phone to us every time she goes out to the dumpster, just in case. I mean, it's a long walk at 10 o'clock at night in a relatively isolated area.
Yeah.
Just a concern as a parent that, because I know typically these Aroma Joe's have one person at the end of shift. And so they got to lock the door, take the trash out, unlock the door, go back in, finish their chores, and go on from there. Just an operational issue. It may be something that comes up later with them.
Okay.
Yeah, so sort of circling back here for application completeness, we have site plan, we have Aroma Joe's building elevations, Jeff, you've noticed, as I had, note about mechanical screening. I see them here on the roof plan. I see the elevations. I think we need to talk more about how they're screened, perhaps later in the process here. I guess as the application's been presented for the retail space at a later date with a 3D conceptual rendering, I think for application of completeness, I think I can be satisfied there. I think I want to know more about that building and the real intention as to its future standing, if it's going to be green space now, or really sort of how that comes into play. Because I guess, Emily, correct me if I'm wrong, if we present it and we review it, then we're reviewing it. It's either in or it's out.
Yes, that's correct. In the past, like with 1031 Portland Road, we had renderings, and it was a site plan amendment. That's what so the applicant's required to come back to the board before they can build the last building, because you still have to do your design review on it.
Correct, yeah. So for discussion this evening, 3D rendering, understanding the conceptual component of it, it being intended for future use, I think I can support that. And then if the project keeps moving forward, understanding if it's in and we're reviewing as part of the project, or if it's not. But other than that, I don't have any additional questions. Did we touch upon all of the board members' thoughts? Joyce? Jim,
I
sorry.
was going to say, if no one has any additional questions, I'll move to find the application complete.
Thank you, Jim. Did Jeff?
Well, I do have an additional question. I just wanted to touch base. So we can deal with it in discussion if you'd like, if you want to continue with that motion.
Why don't you go ahead, Jeff, and I'll...
So part of my concern came in with the traffic volume, that this new building is going to exceed the permitted daily counts, or hourly counts, I think by 30, 31. And I guess it all kind of rolls around into that I didn't see the latest peer review of the traffic, the traffic consultant, because, and I think this comes up a lot with the whole Park North, and I remember the last time I was here, we had quite a bit of discussion about the Waterfall Drive, and there's one traffic movement plan, and the implementation. Some things were not being done according to schedule, and I believe that we had talked about having one clause is that there was no additional occupancy issued until traffic signalization was constructed, not necessarily activated. And it looks like the Maine DOT really weighed in on this on their August 12th, 2020 letter they were summarizing. It's on page 47 of our packet. But it's a little tough here to tell if it's exactly about this particular intersection and the flow, that the mitigation shall be constructed or implemented to MDOT's satisfaction prior to the opening of additional facilities. And it goes into talking about the city. There's stuff that was very specifically called out for Cascade Road and Route 1, off-site improvements, the change in the signalization controller to an ATC type. There was talk of advanced detection for Route 1. There was the talk of connection to the Saco Biddeford centrally managed traffic system, I think Mr. Fox spoke about earlier. And there was installation of an overlap device. And I guess it's just a very clear document, and I would feel much better if we kind of had that peer review, particularly where it sounded like this use was going to very clearly, at a peak hour, exceed what the traffic movement permit had allotted for the subdivision, for the area, or for the scope of the traffic study. So that was just kind of where I was at. I just felt like it was a little bit premature for, to move forward. I mean, we could find the application complete, but I would definitely really like to hear from the peer review, from the traffic engineer, if these detailed things that not only have we been watching at the city level, but the state has been watching as part of that traffic movement plan, have been implemented. And I always feel bad because I feel like it comes to, there's an applicant before us, and these may not be their necessary responsibilities, but somebody has to be watching the overall growth of that area. And at this point, the two best skills that we have are MDOT, who issues the permit, and our peer review. So I just wanted kind of the board to kind of look at that and at least discuss it a little. Thank you.
And if I could follow
Yes,
up
Jim.
with Jeff's comment, if you're referring to it's at page 46, it starts on page 46, Jeff? Is that it? At the very end, that's when they date the letter, and it's dated August 16th of 2020. But they do make a lot of reference, and it confused me at first when I was reading it this weekend, trying to understand it. But it appeared to, because it talked about future signalization, but the signal at Flag Pond Road and Route 1 is now activated. I used it this morning. It works quite well. So I don't know the extent to which that addresses any of those concerns, but I'm sure as we get further into this project, maybe we'll hear more about that. But I do agree that that's an issue that we got to keep on top of.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, for the one that I recall, it was the Waterfall Drive and Route 1. And I think that was called out on one of the original traffic permits. And they had to, remember, we had to review because it was lapsing in its approval time. So there was a lot of talk that went on with traffic movements and how long this process has been going, and the fact that some of the improvements weren't being constructed. And it creates a bit of a hassle or a challenge. And that was one of the reasons we had a lot of discussion on, I think it was the multi-unit building, that the infrastructure would be in play and ready to go. And obviously, that was pre this 2020 letter, but they went so far as to say the infrastructure in the ground would be installed and ready to go, maybe not the mast arms, but they wanted that built. And I usually pay pretty close attention to that sort of stuff, and I haven't seen that out there. So I would really like the peer review, I think, before we move forward.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, Emily.
So page 16 of the meeting packet includes a peer review from Sewell, and we would ask the applicant to respond to this peer review. I know the applicants and traffic engineer had worked on this, and I'm sure Walter can give you more information. As part, of course, it's very important that we stay on that traffic movement permit. So just as an update, from when you were on the board before, Jeff, the traffic movement permit was reissued by the DOT, and that's what you see in the meeting packet. And the developer, the Park North developer, has put forward a letter of credit, and there's an agreement with the city that the work has funding now to make sure it gets done and funds get drawn down as the work progresses. So we do have eyes on it. Every application that comes in is asked to be reviewed against that traffic movement permit, because obviously this lot is part of that permit. So what we would expect to see, I agree, is an updated traffic peer review memo with either the comments have been addressed or here are the comments left remaining.
Thank you, Emily. Yeah, I agree with you, Jeff. I guess I see a lot of traffic information in here, and it seems that everyone is on the same page as to understanding and updating and making sure it comes together. I think understanding, I think there was a last project or two, Emily. I believe some of the conditions of the approval where the traffic light had to be installed and completed before an occupancy or certificate of occupancy for the project would be issued. And as far as I know, I think that's been completed, but I agree there's much more to talk about here and understand and clarify. I agree. I guess I think for the application this evening, I think there's a lot of information, dialogue has been generated and started and ongoing, and I think for the application completeness, I think for me, it's satisfied, but the overall resolution and understanding of traffic is, still has questions for me as well.
And we too have, I think the last memo from Diane went back to Jason Reddy at VHB. He's our traffic consultant. I'm pretty sure, because I supplied her with just a standard car turning movements through the site. And I think Diane has that now for a final review. So I don't pretend to know the nuances of traffic studies.
Sure.
So we depend on her as much as you folks do.
I do know that Jason from VHB reached out to our department, and our assistant planner helped him with a list of projects looking at Park North specifically. So that's been answered as well, maybe a couple weeks ago now.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess just by my timestamp, I think everything Emily has is spot on, but I had, our letter from Diane dated February 20th of 2024. The applicant's response was like March 8th, 2024, and then we had the city engineer's letter on March 11th, but here we are, we haven't had our peer review of the response, and that's just where I was kind of thinking we should kind of keep it on our radar.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it would be very beneficial if, as the project moves forward, if it does, at the next meeting, perhaps we have, at least at a minimum, our traffic consultant here for questions, and maybe perhaps the city engineer, not necessary, but maybe if all the comments have been addressed, perhaps his attendance isn't necessary.
No, we will not be asking the city engineer to attend, but I can ask the traffic peer reviewer to attend.
That's fine, thank you. Okay.
Well, with that, Mr. Chair, I'd move to find the application complete.
Thank you, Jim. for
I'll
the
second.
motion. Joyce for the second. Any additional discussion on application completeness? Those in favor, Jim?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. The board finds the application complete.
Mr. Chair, I'll move to schedule a public hearing for site plan review on April 16th, 2024.
Second.
Thank you, Jim and Rob. Any additional discussion for scheduling the meeting date for the 16th of April? Those in favor, Jim?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. So Emily and Lisa could schedule site plan review for the 16th of April, and the board finds the application complete. Thank you.
All right, thank you, folks.
Board members, we have another item here before a few of our general correspondence item. Is there any request for a brief recess, or would the board like to continue?
Can we take 5 minutes?
Sure. So we'll do a 5-minute recess and we'll continue. Thank you. All right, thank you, everyone. It's 8:32 PM, and we will continue this evening with our next agenda item, item 4D. This is HEP USA 3 Saco LLC. The authorized agent this evening is CV Mahar Engineers. This is a site plan review and conditional use review for installation of a 19.6 megawatt AC solar array on New County Road, map 95, lots 2, 5, 6, 7, map 94, lot 7, in the RC and WR zoning districts. This evening is a application for completeness review. Before we begin, I wanted to note to the board and to the applicant, I am familiar with the applicant's representative here and have a current construction project ongoing, and just sort of full disclosure, I don't see any conflicts this evening, but for the board to determine my participation and the applicant as well.
I don't see any issue with you having a business connection with the applicant's representative.
I don't either.
So just to be clear, it's a business connection on another project, not on this project.
Correct, not on this project. I didn't know Mr. Reed was going to be here this evening until yesterday. And I don't work on solar array projects. Apartment buildings, maybe, not solar array projects. But, and the applicant, any comment, participation, any, what's the word I'm looking for? Objection.
Concern or
excuse me.
objection?
We have no objection.
All right, great, thank you. Emily, do you want to introduce this project briefly for us this evening?
Sure. So you did a great job. It's solar farm, and it's over 169 acres of land. Proposed developed area of 96.6 acres, subject to conditional use review, site plan review, and then we also have a solar energy systems commercial ordinance in Chapter 180. So we have given you the application checklist for you to review, and the applicants requested several waivers. That's why we note the 179-7.01 section of our ordinance regarding waivers. Those waivers, you'll see them listed out in bullets. It's for landscaping, signage, lighting, hydrogeologic assessment, and mapping of trees under the solar energy systems, and future conditions conceptual plan requirement. So if you have any questions, we gave you the departmental comments as well, some discussion items, and a couple of things that we're looking at is asking if the board wants to receive comments from the Conservation Commission, asking if the board wants to host a site walk, but we can get into those under the discussion items. Thanks.
Thank you, Emily. Applicant's representative is with us this evening. I guess, yeah, go ahead with your presentation.
I was going to say, you guys did a really good job. There's not much left to present. So my name is Jeff Reed. I work with CV Mahar Engineers, and I'm here to represent HEP USA SPV 3 Saco LLC, which is the entity that is applying for this project. With me here this evening is Bob Patton and Tom Donnelly, who are both representatives of HEP USA. The presentation is going to start with a little introduction about HEP, the developer, who they are and what they represent, so that you guys are familiar with what the work that they do. Side to side.
Good evening, Tom Donnelly from HEP Energy. HEP is the German investment fund. We're an equivalent of a boutique version of Fidelity, and we take in investments that are strictly assigned to solar energy that is developed all around the world. We have projects from Japan, Canada, the UK. Bob and I were the first 2 employees here in the US, and we now have about 75 employees on 5 different branches throughout the US since 2019. Our sole purpose is in the investment into solar development. We a vertically integrated operation where we can invest, develop, we own, we operate, we do our own EPC, and we are in the projects for the longevity. So that's the sole purpose, is what we're licensed under the BaFin fund in Germany, which is the equivalent of the SEC. So the sole purpose of us as a company is solar development. As I said, we are in the development, in the construction, the operations. We are actually in construction and O&M, we probably have 35 to 40 out in North Carolina. We have another 50 or 60 in Japan in 2 offices. And we have a robust team in Europe as well. So everything we do is from community scale all the way up to utility scale. Our smallest projects are a couple of acres in the southeast of England, right up to the largest project, which is Medicine Hat outside of Saskatchewan. And it's 120 megawatts, about 600 acres of land. So to date, we have 80 solar farms worldwide. We have a combined capacity of 1,300 megawatts of producing energy. And in the pipeline projects, of which Saco is a pipeline of 5,300 megawatts. This is very much an evolving science as it keeps changing on a daily and weekly basis. As you can see, we have operations from Maine all the way down into North Carolina, where we have a White Street project. We now have added another project in Georgia. Peak Clean Energies, our office out of Colorado. That project, they mainly deal with projects over 80 megawatts. So they have a number of projects in Texas, and we have projects up in Canada as well. So as you can see, worldwide, we have a lot of projects in play. Our company was founded by one of the consultant tax accountants to the German government back 14 years ago when solar was started. So we've evolved as a banking firm and a development firm, and that's what we've done. One project, which a few of the projects I want to highlight for you tonight, is the Depot project. Very like our Saco project, which we're proposing. You can see we have these lily pads, they're satellite areas where we're preserving the existing tree lines as much as possible, wetlands, etc. And here's a project that's in current operation, and the size of that project, 21 megawatts. It's almost equivalent to ours. So in this case, we're looking at locating 1,900 feet off New County Road. We're going directly into the Loudon substation. This was the attraction to going to this location. Loudon substation allows us to attach directly onto the transmission system in New England, and it also is what we refer to as a node. It's a point where electricity is measured by the ISO, which is the controlling body in all of New England for electricity. Project size 96 acres, and buffering between the project and neighbors quite substantial. So I'm going to let Jeff move on with the rest of this part.
So yeah, we'll get into a little bit more of the nuts and bolts of this project here. As Matt and Emily had mentioned before, legal descriptions for the parcels. This is going to be constructed on a combined lease from, I think, 4 or 5 different property owners, identified as map 94 lot 7, and then 95 lots 2, 5, 6, and 7. We talked about the Rural Conservation Zoning District. One of the good things about this project is that it is essentially landlocked. So from a visibility standpoint, from an impact standpoint, it's minimal. We're able to take advantage of an existing access drive through the Picard gravel pit, which is also allowing us to minimize our impact and basically efficiently develop the parcel. And again, as Tom had mentioned, we'll be using natural buffering around the solar array to provide both visual and sound buffering for the project. Most of the parcels that we're on are historically selectively harvested. So, you can see I've got a couple aerials in before the cut lines and everything else. So trees have been cut on this property for a while. Like most large sites in Maine, there are several environmental considerations that we had to deal with. Substantial wetlands, and this kind of goes back to what Tom had mentioned before on the sample project that he referenced. We've got several different cells where we've built in and around existing wetland areas. Again, we're using existing construction and minor development as best we can to minimize impact to the natural resources on the property. And we've tried to maintain separation from the wetlands as much as we can. There is one vernal pool complex on the site. We've honored the 250-foot critical terrestrial habitat setback with that. There are no solar panel, solar racking structures within that setback. We do have a little bit of clearing within that setback. We've minimized that to the greatest extent practicable. It has been reviewed, and it conforms to current development standards with DEP. We've kept that less than 25%. There are also streams mapped on the property. Similar to the vernal pools, we've honored the setbacks to those, specifically the statutory DEP requirements. So we've maintained separation from any structure, solar panel 75 feet to a stream. For shading purposes, we have cleared within that 75-foot setback, but we have not encroached any closer than 25 feet in accordance with current DEP standards. And again, the tree clearing, we've tried to reduce that as much as we can. As Emily had mentioned, the overall lease area is just under 170 acres. We're clearing a lot, a little over 96, but not nearly the whole thing. So we've minimized that as much as we can as well. That's probably hard for you guys to see. It's the overall parcel here. But what I had intended to do was kind of toggle back and forth. If you guys can see either on your iPads, there's a dark wetland hatch in there. These are the proposed development areas. And again, the access road coming through has been oriented to minimize wetland impacts. The array clusters themselves are sited in upland areas. There are sections along the outside where we have impacted wetlands, but again, we've gone through about 3 or 4 different design iterations to try to minimize those impacts. With regard to the site entrance, in the upper right corner here, you can see the entrance that we'll be using, which is the existing site entrance to Picard Enterprises and their gravel pit. We've negotiated a lease with them to access through the property and an existing travelway through the pit up to the lease area and the entrance to our site, which is in the upper left, the furthest left corner of this figure. This access drive will be improved to fire access road standards. It'll be 20 feet. It'll be reinforced with gravel and geotextile to make sure that we have safe access to and from the project area. On the other end of the project is the interconnection from the overall site. This comes out of the northern end of the site and goes cross-country along existing property lines that have been negotiated with the property owners for an overhead interconnection line to the substation, which is a little further north on New County Road. This figure here shows the CMP corridor on the left-hand side. It shows our generator lead. You can see that upper portion of New County Road. And then in the bottom corner is the very edge of our leased area. So that's going to be the overland cross-country route to connect the system to the grid. We've got some photos here that were taken. Obviously not this winter. I don't think we had that much snow all winter, but this process started for us about a year ago with DEP. So these photos were taken this past, and they show kind of existing conditions around the limits of the array. The first one is the eastern side, approximately 50 feet. And the point there was that, there's a mix of kind of low growth, evergreen, provides good screening for sound as well as for sight. The one on the right is a little closer, right on the edge of the corridor, and you can actually see down through the trees a little bit, some of the utility poles and transmission wires there. Here are a couple of other examples near the site entrance and then along the southern edge of the parcel, which is pretty close to that vernal pool envelope, from about the center of the array looking south. Just a few project details. The array is going to be served within the lease area by about 4,000 lineal feet of 20-foot wide gravel access drive. We're going to have about 3,800 feet of perimeter or peripheral roads, service roads, going out to service other sections of the array. In addition to this, the section of the access within the gravel pit that's going to be improved is roughly another 3,000 feet. So there's a lot of road going in here. Our overall impacts, we're looking at just over 96 acres of developed area. We've got a little more than 1.25 acres of direct wetland impact, and then another approximately 8 acres of indirect wetland impact that were cleared because of for shading purposes for the array. And about 3.5 acres of impervious area. Most of that's made up by the road. Out of that 3.5, about 11,000 square feet are concrete pads for transformers and other equipment, and then another 522 square feet of foundation cross-sectional area. But the bulk of that is the access road coming in. As Emily had mentioned, we're asking for 4 waivers for the project. These are the sections and the items. Lighting, we're asking for the waiver because we're not proposing any lights. And similarly, for the landscaping, we believe there's adequate buffering, natural buffering around this to provide sight and sound screening. We're not proposing any additional landscaping within the array footprint itself. The sign waiver, again, we're not proposing any signs. Each of the array sections will be surrounded by agricultural fence, built to electrical codes, and there will be a small placard at the gate with emergency contact information, but there's going to be no roadside signing, nothing that would advertise or anything like that. So we're asking for a waiver from that requirement as well. And the fourth is for the hydrogeologic assessment. It's a solar array. There is no proposed water, no proposed sewer. The elements that construct this are inert. We're not going to be impacting the groundwater, so we're asking for a waiver from the hydrogeologic assessment as well. Additional permitting, as you might expect, DEP. We had a whole list. We have received all of these permits from DEP within the last week and a half, which includes Site Location of Development Act permit, NERPA Tier 3 Wetland Impact permit, and a main DEP permit by rule notification as well for activity adjacent to the natural resource, utility crossings, and whatnot that we needed to actually construct the array and the site access. Questions or comments?
You mentioned with the landscaping, sight or sound buffers.
Yep.
Solar panels don't make a lot of sound, do they?
No, they don't, but some of the equipment, the inverters in particular, can make a humming. We have gone through and located everything to make sure it met setbacks, make sure that we meet the noise ordinance at the property lines. We had a study performed by an agency out of, was it Atlantic? Yep, Atlantic. They're a group that specializes in that work. It's included in the application package.
Jeff?
Mr. Chair, if I may. I noticed you were requesting 4 waivers according to your list, but in our packet, we have that an additional waiver for section 180-9A1 for the site mapping of the existing vegetation. Does that mean that you're no longer requesting a waiver for that?
No, we will, yes, I'm sorry, yeah. And that was, Emily, help me out here, this was the trees in excess of 20 inches?
Yes, this is, and I think it was listed as a waiver in the materials that you submitted for
Okay.
the application, so
Okay.
that's why we flagged it.
No, my apologies for not including that in this, but yes, we'll be asking for a waiver from that as well, and that in part is because we're looking at nearly 100-acre site. We're clearing, you know, what we have to construct the array and nothing more. And it's a fairly significant effort and expense to go through and count every tree that is more than 20 inches, given the history of the property where it's previously harvested. We're asking for relief from that.
Emily, that is that's a conditional use item, in opposed to a site plan item, correct?
So that's a chapter 180 item, and I can pull up chapter 180 on the screen. That's actually from the Commercial Solar Energy Systems Ordinance. If you give me a quick second, I can pull it up for you. And then it's also, as far as the mapping of trees, it's also, Mr. Chair, you are correct, under conditional use for 230-1404, E14.
Okay, thank you.
But I think if I'm correct, when I'm reading the ordinance of 180 for the commercial solar, it's kind of our benchmark, right? We're asking them to do this survey because part of the condition is to return it back to its natural state at the end of life or at the end of occupancy. So without having an inventory or a clear documentation of what's there now, that leaves it very arbitrary on the restoration side. We kind of tie our hands. The analogy, I think, is leasing out your home and letting the people that are moving in take the inventory of the possessions and then try to hold them accountable. And there's a flip side to that, too, is that when you read further into Article 180, they're supposed to be providing the remediation, the projected remediation cost or decommissioning costs of their own project, and then they'll secure funding for that as a financial guarantee for the city, so if they can't meet that obligation, which I think is very important. When we talked about this stuff a few years ago, the decommissioning aspect of being thought of is important to me. But at the same token, I never really saw anything in there that said it would be peer-reviewed. So it's kind of like the fox watching the hen house, right? They're determining their own decommissioning costs, but I think at the very least we should think very strongly before we waive that inventory of the trees, and I understand it is a large parcel, but that's the nature of the business, is that we need to be able to know what was there to restore it to its existing state. If we don't have documentation, then we don't know.
So also just the section 189A 3 notes the peer review by a professional.
Yeah, and I guess
So that was another question for the board when you get there.
that was kind of when I interpreted that, and I guess the board, we should talk and might be too late for this applicant, but I interpreted some of that peer review about their operational standards, and there's definitely a clause about peer review there, that it's being operated and maintained in a safe fashion, and the city has a peer review establish that. I didn't interpret the language being there, and maybe Jim or Joyce can help weigh in at some point, that also applies to the decommissioning funding allocation, if you will.
Yeah, and I'm sure you're aware, because there are copies of the DEP applications here in town as well, that, I mean, we do have a decommissioning plan. We have provided for funding and amounts. I think that is usually coordinated between the city and DEP. I know from DEP's perspective, they really don't care who holds, the bond or whatever, as long as there's a bond. And we have set that up. There is a decommissioning plan in place. And I'm pretty sure we included a copy of that as follow-up documentation with the city application.
I believe we have a copy of that, yep.
Yeah. So, and with regard to when the array sees the end of its service life and is removed, kind of the standard that we see, and I understand that, I mean, the city has their own ordinance. The array, all its elements, all its components, everything is removed. The site's clean, the site's stabilized, and basically it converts back to meadow. So from kind of industry standard, state standard, and what DEP requires is a stable site when you leave. I understand the town values, trees and taller vegetation, but the intent was to stabilize the site and let it revegetate naturally. There is some consideration here for the property owners, and when this does revert back to them, they should probably get a say as well in how this site is left. They may not want it. They may not want trees.
So question, so this property is currently owned by property owners, you're leasing it?
Correct.
Significantly long-term lease?
Yes.
So, yeah, it would be pretty hard to map 96 acres of every tree that's out there. The other opportunity might be aerial shot, but then as he pointed out, what do the owners want if it ever does come back to them? I mean, if it was their property, they could go out and clear cut the trees right now themselves, as a property owner, without the city getting involved, right?
If I can, Mr. Chair?
Sure.
It may be helpful, I refreshed myself on our waiver standard, which we included here. So like if the applicant's asking for a waiver and they can't provide everything, or there's a reason why they can't provide everything as the standard notes, is there something that they can provide in support of the waiver? So that may be a question back to the applicant if there's something that you're wrestling with.
Thank you, Emily. Jeff, yes?
So my bringing this up was just to try to leave the city as in the most defendable position possible for whoever is going to be dealing with this 20, 25 years down the road. And if we had that inventory, I felt like it was an important thing. The second piece is, can you tell me that the line extension, if you will, or I think you called it a generator feed, that's going to connect over to the substation? So your
The interconnection.
The interconnection point? Our ordinance says to the greatest extent possible, it should be placed underground. You're choosing to go overhead. Does the area that's being cleared that you presented for the arrays include the transmission space that you're going to create for that generator feed all the way back to the substation. You mentioned you had secured lease, but the amount of vegetation that's being cut, does that include that line that's going to go to?
Yes, yeah. And the reason that it's aerial is because there are we're looking to, again, minimize impact, and we're spanning existing wetland areas so that we're not having to tear that stuff up.
Sure, but that also means that because it's aerial, that you're going to have clear cut or tree management on either side of it, so we don't have contact during
Right.
storm events, right? So it's going to be a wider corridor for tree trimming versus something that was buried. We're weighing up.
Right. I think we have it set up right now as a 20-foot wide. We've kind of shrunk that down and minimized it as best we could. But you're right, that's a really good point.
Thank you, Jeff. Emily, when we go through the waivers, Emily, and then the project goes to site plan and the next steps, we've had scenarios where we've requested from the applicant additional information or clarifying information. I guess in a scenario where we've, I guess, correct me or clarify, please. If we grant a waiver, we can't in 2, 3, 6 months then require that information? Or can we? How does that come into play? And
Yeah, so if the board grants the waiver, then we're not going to be asking for it as part of the application. Now, if you get out on the site, like, let's say you go on the site walk and there's something really concerning that you want more information about, then you can ask for more information. But if we're going to be reviewing this and you grant a waiver, like, we're not going to go ask for a lighting plan if you grant a waiver for a lighting plan. Now, if you get out there and something seems unsafe and you want a light in one spot, that might be an example of
Sure. Okay.
something.
I'm thinking about Jeff's points and concerns and thinking the reality of 96 acres, getting every tree over 20 inches and existing vegetation surveys, just trying to understand where we're going from where we've been. I understand that thought. I'm just trying to,
Right,
just thinking about
once
that.
we've granted a waiver, there's no going back. I guess I struggle with it too, and I agree with Jeff. I mean, this is exactly what this ordinance is designed for. It's not like, it's not like a solar array is accidentally getting caught up in these overly restrictive rules. These are rules designed for commercial solar energy systems. And if nothing else, it seems like the suggestion to have the Conservation Commission weigh in would be helpful for us. I mean, if the Conservation Commission comes in and says, oh yeah, this is overly burdensome to require 96 acres to be assessed, that certainly has some impact on me. But, I'm looking at the plain language of the chapter regarding solar energy systems, and it certainly seems like when we designed this ordinance that it was designed for this exact purpose, to set a baseline and to provide a future plan to revegetate or restore the property to its baseline condition. And it seems like we have to know what the baseline is to be able to do that.
So I can speak a little bit, if you want, Mr. Chair, on the concept plan piece.
Sure.
So the reason why that's worded as conceptual plan is because when we were drafting the ordinance, this was a newer ordinance, and the conceptual plan was noted because we know that things may change in the future with property owners, but we wanted to get it documented as to what the future could look like for the property. So it could be accounted for in decommissioning. And then if we have loss, like vegetation loss, what are we doing to account for it? So that was the theory behind these two sections.
Thank you, Emily. I mean, the reality of it is if we if every tree over 20 inches is documented, we're not gonna, I mean, the reality isn't to say we are gonna require every one of those trees kept, or upon decommissioning that every 20-inch plus tree that's removed gets replanted. But I'm thinking more specifically about rare botanical features, and perhaps we've had projects recently with American chestnut trees, for example, and we want to preserve those. So understanding if that particular scenario exists, I think is maybe a potential important starting point, but I'm just thinking the reality of documenting every 20-inch tree to say they have to stay or they have to go back, or that's what I'm trying to
So,
understand what we're, you know what I mean?
Well, I don't think it's necessarily, I don't think that's the burden on us this evening. I mean, it's just,
Sure.
when we weigh out this ordinance that's before us, is to try to adhere and have the foresight of what it'll mean when this is decommissioned. If we don't give them the inventory, the people that'll be replacing us in a generation won't know what was there. There's no baseline. And I just feel like it's a little bit of an injustice to the future. We have, there's a lot of benefits. There's a lot of communal pressure for these types of developments. There's some great benefits, right? Where we're kind of ensuring this land's not being developed in residential housing. There's some green alternatives that the community has been calling for in the comprehensive plan. There's a lot of benefits. I just think it's a matter of giving them the inventory. If this were, Mr. Biggs brought up the point, if the property owners wanted to have this land harvested right now, they're going to send a forester out there who's going to go and take an inventory so they know roughly what their stumpage is and what income they should have from that harvest, right? So they do this all the time, right? They send foresters out to do inventory for timber value, and that would essentially, I'm assuming, be even easier because we're only talking 20 inches at breast height. We're not talking about the entire inventory that might be harvested. We're talking about the significant trees and rare species. So I just think, for me, it's important to have that investment in the baseline so that those decisions, that documentation is there for the future.
so can I jump in here for a second? Because that's a really good,
Yes,
good
please.
point, and that might be a really good compromise. I understand you don't want to set a precedent now and just throw the whole thing out the window. When a forester goes out and he surveys a parcel, he typically doesn't go out and count every tree, right? He'll set up a grid. He'll take a representative sample of that grid, count trees within that section, and then project it out over the entire parcel. That's something that we could probably do, certainly do before construction. I realize that's not what we're here for right now in terms of application completeness, but in terms of the waiver, if that's something that we could agree to as a condition of approval, maybe, that we do that and have the site cruised before construction, so that there is some sort of a record as to the vegetation that's there. Would that help? Would that be something that you might meet the intent of that requirement as well?
So I got a question. So the intent of, as Matt mentioned, we're not going to replant 20-inch trees in the future. So are we trying to establish some kind of a financial fund to revegetate it in some replant it with trees, et cetera, so on and so forth? And in order to do that, as I think you're mentioning, is to do several grid samples and then project that through aerial photographs and other ways of measuring kind of how many and where it was treed and forested, or where there was forest and where there was not. And then are we, again, going back, are we trying to establish a fund to then reforest it? Or
Well, I guess to
What?
to Jeff's point is, without creating a baseline, we're not sure, what we have or where we can
Right, but
go
again, looking
forward.
at photographs, Google Earth, you can say this many acres were forested at this moment, and then a forester goes out and does 2 or 3 grids and says, okay, the average is this many trees in this kind of forest, and projects it out accordingly. So now we have an idea of what was forested today, or what has forest today, and then what is the length of the lease on this thing?
35?
20 years?
So 20-year with a 20-year extension, so 40
Okay,
total.
so theoretically, 20 years from now, solar's not the thing anymore, you take it apart. Or, yes, it is, and you've changed your panels to super panels and you continue on, right? That kind of
Right.
thing is the intent. And so if there is the end of life may never happen, but if it does happen, then what would your suggestion at that point be? Would be to go back and retree it?
Mr. Chair, if I may?
Yes.
So I don't have any intention. I'm just trying to be the referee here and looking at, Chapter 180 and environmental requirements. The city of Saco has determined that existing tree cover is critical to environmental health, quality of life, and environmental safety here in the city of Saco, and helps mitigate against the curtail impacts of a quickly shifting climate as well as extreme temperatures and variability. For these reasons, commercial solar systems shall be required. Sorry, I emphasize shall because in my world there's no choice but to do that. Required to provide the following documentation and/or representation during review by the City of Saco and its officials. The first one being existing and future conditions. One and is what we're talking about, right? So I just feel like we're kind of, when they adopted this ordinance, they were very specific that they've got environmental goals and they recognize that solar is an avenue that they want to go, but they're also saying that our vegetation cover is important to them as well. And just sitting here, I'm trying to weigh out both of them, right? And I just feel like it's a bit of an injustice to just approve it without giving them the inventory. Who decides for those future condition requirements for the conceptual plan when they return this to their natural state at decommissioning? That's the landowner, that's whoever's sitting on the boards at that time. But if we don't give them the inventory or the baseline, there's no way that they can achieve that. It's very arbitrary, and I just didn't want to cut anybody short by letting it be a quick oversight.
Yeah, so you're saying you want to give someone in the future, when we're all long gone, here's what was there. And I think that short of counting every single tree in 96 acres, there's a more systematic approach to do that probably. A grid, aerial photographs. There's, I'm sure, people that do this beyond, foresters, et cetera, beyond counting every single tree.
Sure. And for the purposes of tonight, and I understand the conflict and I understand setting up the baseline, so we'll withdraw the waiver request for that portion with the understanding that rather than go out and count every single tree, if we can get a forester, and if we can get a forester to do this before the next meeting, we will. If we can't get a forester to do this before the next meeting, we'll definitely do it before construction. Have him go out, cruise the site, provide, it'll be essentially his estimate of the inventory, because the forester will go out, set up his grid, and do his count, and then project that over the entire cleared area. If that will satisfy the requirement of the ordinance, then we'll withdraw the waiver and do that.
So I would suggest withdraw the waiver tonight, and before next meeting, come up with your suggested methodology, and it may be an industry standard. Again, I'm not in forestry, so I don't know either. So like what, this is not the first rodeo, I'm sure you've run into somebody that wants a tree inventory. When I say you, more like them. HEP.
Sure.
And so HEP's run into this before. What do they know about it? What has been done before? So, yeah, withdraw it tonight and have a plan in the next meeting. And that way we haven't said no or yes. And we can at least investigate the best way to address it before we make a decision one way or the other. Is that acceptable?
If I can respond to Rob, I think that makes a lot of sense. If the term vegetation survey is a term of art, that means a specific way of trying to count the trees. You know, maybe your suggestion doesn't make any sense, but I bet it's not a term of art, and there may be several different ways of surveying the vegetation there that wouldn't require someone to count every single tree that's over 20 inches. So I think withdrawing the waiver, coming up with some, as Rob said, some methodology to be able to sort of count what's there on the site, and I think that would address a lot of Jeff's concerns too. I think that makes sense.
So we'll withdraw the waiver, we'll reach out to some local foresters and come up with a plan.
Jeff, if you wouldn't mind, could you bring up your slide that had the overlay of the solar panel arrays? I'm following the board here, and
There you go.
it seems these nodes you sort of described perhaps could be a good starting point. Clearly, the nodes have been designed and laid out based upon landscaping, wetlands, and other natural site features there. So perhaps that's sort of a starting point and maybe a benchmark to understand this node over here to, you know, page right is generally consisted upon X vegetation and caliper trees of X, Y, and Z. That perhaps can begin to give us an understanding and a benchmark of that information. So that perhaps.
Right. It's not the entire site, it's just the locations of the clearing.
Right, the site
proposed.
the site area being impacted, yes.
Which is that 100 acres. And I mean, honestly, I suspect based on the history of the parcel, there may be no trees on this site that are 20 inches in diameter. But we should, we can reach out to some local foresters and provide that information as a baseline.
All right, that would be great.
Okay, so we'll withdraw that waiver request.
So sort of circling back here, board members, we have, before us here, we have an application of completeness for site plan review. We have an application for completeness for conditional use review. We really have two applications for this one project. Site plan, we have waivers before us for section F, lighting, G, landscape, H, signage, and L, the hydrogeologic assessment. And then with the conditional use, we talked about withdrawing those waivers of the vegetation and caliper sizes there. I guess perhaps without, I mean, I have questions in general about the project, but I think application-wise.
Well, I do have one more question.
Sure.
If we've kind of put the tree inventory to bed.
Sure.
The hydrological assessment, not really looking so much for aquifers, but depending what type of experience you have, and I'm not sure what your mounting structures are made of, sometimes there is concern with leaching of zinc off of galvanized metal or some of the hard metals out of the solar panels if they should become damaged during a hailstorm. Obviously, you guys are in business to try to make money, so when there's a damaged panel, you want to try to get it out there.
Right.
But is there the same kind of inventory goes, right? Should there be soil tests that are done pre-construction, kind of scattered throughout these pods, just to know if there are any soil contamination so that they would have a baseline at decommissioning if there had been leaching that took place during the lifetime of the installation? And I don't know if if our technique of hydrological assessments would really be looking for that type of contamination. I guess
No, it doesn't. So a hydrogeologic assessment is not soil sampling. It's not trying to determine if there are any contaminants or hazardous materials in the soil. It basically ties to groundwater and groundwater levels, groundwater flows, what direction they go. So if there were a pollutant to be introduced, where is it going to end up? Is it going to contaminate somebody's well? Is it going to be, I mean, you see these mostly when you're dealing with stuff like septic systems or that sort of thing, where you're actually introducing some sort of a foreign matter in. The foundations on these are they're either driven piles or ground screws, which are metals, but in terms of leaching and that sort of thing, it typically isn't something that happens in any quantity significant enough to impact somebody's well. And the other piece about the panels themselves are basically constructed of inert materials. And I know at one point there was a lot of stuff circulating, out there in terms of, rain falling on panels and materials leaching into the soil. None of that's true, and none of it's been substantiated. And there's been a fair amount of research that's been done on that since that claim, came out, and it just isn't true. So from a soil contaminant standpoint, that's not what the hydrogeologic assessment does.
I guess my question is more to the board, right? I mean,
Yeah.
what do we do to offer another baseline, if it's even possible? So,
Is that, Jeff, is that a standard that's different than the hydrogeologic assessment?
well, yeah, my understanding is pretty much how Jeff described it, is that we typically utilize that when we have, private septic systems and we're worried about wells and directional flow. But it is referenced in our standards, and that they're requesting a waiver on it versus a little bit of sampling. And, if watching some of the larger transmission corridors, they're not using galvanized towers much anymore. They use like a containment system when they decommission those. So is there a possibility of, some of these post-leaching, I guess, is the question. And can they do 20 soil tests throughout the site and just see what the baseline chemistry is so that we have that in the file for when they leave? If it was done at the pods, I don't know. Maybe it's not a concern to the board at all. That's the only lead-in to that is for ground condition or ground contamination is the hydrological assessment. So do we waive that? And I don't even know if we could ask for a baseline soil chemistry. I don't know.
Yeah, and I guess, Mr. Chair, looking at 179-4.03L, when a hydrogeologic assessment is required, projects in which groundwater quality is a concern include but not limited to sites over a sand and gravel aquifer, which we've got mapping here that shows it's not over an aquifer.
Right.
Not served by public water or sewer, we're not accessing either. Where the depth to groundwater is less than 48 inches, poor or very poor soils for subsurface septic systems, no septic system. Coarse soils having severe limitations for septic systems, again, no septic system, or septic system of over 2,000 gallons a day proposed. So it sounds like none of these instances where groundwater quality is possibly impacted apply here. So
Yeah.
I'd be comfortable with a waiver on that.
Yeah, Joyce, through those sections, I would as well. We have the medium intensity soils mapping, the proximity to any adjacent residential properties is quite a ways. I guess not, understanding Jeff's concerns, of course. I don't see this the same as perhaps some of the other solar projects we've reviewed over existing farmland. I think I would feel differently in that scenario, where if it's existing farmland and perhaps it goes back to farmland, and but where this is native trees, I think I can support that waiver.
I agree.
Any other board members' thoughts? So would the board, if we take this from an organizational standpoint if we look at application for completeness for site plan review and the 4 waivers there, would the board like to address the waivers individually or address them as a whole? Would we like to have additional discussion? We didn't talk about landscape, signage, or lighting.
Mr. Chair, I think it makes sense to take them one at a time because we might not all be unanimous on some or all of them. And by that note, I'd move to approve the waiver request to section 179-4.03G and section 230-1404E7 regarding the request for waivers for a landscape plan and landscaping and buffering plan, given the fact that this project is set back from the road, set back from residential areas, and there is ample natural buffering.
Second.
Thank you for the motion, Joyce, and the second. Jim? Any discussion? So, Emily, can you confirm Joyce's waiver hits the requirements for site plan and conditional use waiver?
Yes, I combine them for you.
Okay, and you're okay with that?
I'm good with that.
Okay.
And it's only for application completeness,
Correct.
submission items.
Correct. And Joyce, you're good with that?
Yes.
That was your intention? Okay. Any additional discussion? Jeff?
Just a thought, for some of these, if we were to have questions, and I get what Joyce's point is that it's set back for the landscaping, would it be more prudent to schedule a site walk before we kind of grind through the waivers to find the application complete, if we were to have questions? Or
I suppose we could if we'd like. I think a site walk is important on this one as well, so I would support a site walk. I guess for the board's discussion, if we feel a site walk is necessary in order to find the application complete, I guess that's up for board discussion. I guess, board members, your thoughts, I guess, on the motion and a site walk?
I mean, I think a site walk is a great idea. I don't know that it would really sway me either way with regards to this landscaping, signage, lighting, or hydrological assessment. I would like to see it certainly, I mean, in my unexpert viewpoint of forestry, it would be worthwhile I'd like to see what it looks like. We might get out there and say, geez, there's not a tree 15 inches wide anywhere out here, just when you walk around, right? I mean, we're not going to walk all 96 acres, but I think you get a good sense of what's out there. But for the ones that are requested, I don't think a site walk is going to, change my opinion either way that I could see. But I do want to do a site walk, certainly. So I'm suggesting that maybe we go through these waiver requests and then schedule a site walk as soon as possible. like
Okay.
before next meeting kind of thing.
Thank you, Rob. As I guess Emily confirmed for me, granting the waivers doesn't prohibit the board from asking questions about lighting, addressing landscaping in some fashion, or requiring additional information or understanding, upon the soils or any of these items and conditions. Is that correct, Emily? Is that?
Yes, what you're looking to do is just say that you are waiving a formal submission under section 179 4.03G and 230 1404 E7. What you're not doing is saying that the project meets the requirement of buffering. Like, we'll have another section that we have to go through. So if you get out there and you say, there's really no buffering here, applicant, what can buffering be done in this section of the project? And they still have the waiver, the submission requirement, but they don't have the waiver to the standard. Does that make sense to everyone here?
Yes, or if we were a lighting plan, for example, photometrics, but that doesn't prohibit the board to ask, require, understand lighting in a particular area that we find more significant, or security, or whatever we kind of come up with.
You're just, we're waiving the plan
Correct.
and not a specific solution to a problem that we see when you're there.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any additional discussion? All right, so motion made and seconded to grant the waiver for landscaping, section 179-403G and section 230-1404E7. Those in favor, Jim?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. That's 5-0 to grant the request for the landscaping waiver.
And Mr. Chair, I move to approve the waiver request to section 179-403H and section 230-1404E9 regarding providing location and dimensions of signs and details of signs, because there is no additional signage proposed at the development beyond a modest sign identifying the site owner and contact information.
Second.
Thank you for the motion, Joyce, and the second, Jim. Any additional board discussion? Those in favor, Jim?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. 5-0 to grant the waiver for lighting.
A signage.
Sorry, excuse me, signage.
Yeah, and Mr. Chair, if I can just interject, I love that we're giving reasons for the waivers, but just so you know, you don't necessarily have to in this case, but I do love that you're providing findings. You do need to provide like the reason for like the parking waiver, but you don't need to do it on application completeness.
You can't train
just
us
so
and
you
then
know.
untrain us.
Yeah.
I know,
One or the
that
other.
sounds confusing, but just FYI.
We do pay attention to all that material you send us. We read it.
Tal, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I move to approve the waiver request to section 179-403M and section 230-1404E8, which is requirements for lighting plans.
Second.
Thank you, Joyce and Jim. Those in favor, Jim?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
I would vote yes as well. 5-0 to grant the waiver for lighting.
And Mr. Chair, I move to approve the waiver request for a hydrogeologic assessment pursuant to section 179-403L.
Second.
Thank you for the motion, Joyce, and the second, Jim. Any additional board discussion? Those in favor, Jim?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
No.
Rob?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. 4-1 in favor of the waiver for the hydrogeologic assessment. Emily, we have we have here from the applicant's confirmation here, the withdrawal of the waiver for section 180-9A1. Is that correct? Do you have that in your
Yes, that's
notes?
what I heard.
So with that, I believe we've captured all of the requested waivers.
So, Mr. Chair, I'm thinking that I don't think we can find the applications for conditional use and site plan complete until we have some type of vegetation survey that the applicant has agreed to provide. I don't know if I'm mistaken about that, but it seems like that's a piece of information that we need to have.
So, Emily, my understanding, the existing vegetation and the requirement for, well, I guess, can you confirm that is applicable for both site plan and for conditional use? Or is that?
Well, it's a zoning standard, so
Zoning
it's under
standard.
conditional use, so it's primarily applicable under conditional use, but since you're reviewing these together, the site plan, if you're going to be requiring this, will need to be updated.
And we have in the past, after discussion, like we've had this evening, we can, if the board decides, to find the application complete and require the information to be submitted at a later date. Have we done that before? For some reason, I feel like we have, but I don't.
You may have, I don't think that
Okay.
we've done that recently.
Maybe not
But
recently.
you may have in the past.
Okay. I'm just confirming for discussion.
I think that's exactly it, that we have found applications complete for purposes of discussion, so that we can proceed on with having a public meeting on something. I think that's what you're thinking of.
Well, I thought we had in the past. I think Emily has confirmed we haven't done it perhaps recently.
Not recently. The board can take up any motions that it chooses if it's for purposes of discussion, to get the site walk going and everything else going, and that's the board's direction, then you can do that.
So I guess for discussion, if the board wishes, based on discussion this evening, to find the application materials provided, discussion had, we could find the application complete with the requirement of a site walk and existing vegetation survey provided prior to the next meeting. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how much. I feel like we've had this conversation in the past as to the application materials itself. They're here, I don't know. Jeff?
I mean, I feel like, we shouldn't be holding up, necessarily the process. I believe our ordinance says that we cannot find the application complete because we're missing a submission. But there would be nothing that would stop us from deciding that we need to have a site walk for them to post the site walk, because the site walk is not contingent on having a complete application, if I'm correct.
So in the past, I think I have recommended that we have a complete application to have the site walk, just so that everything's clear when we've started our review. The other option is if the board wanted to find just the site plan complete tonight and then hold off on the conditional use review, because that's where the mapping of the 24-inch trees comes into play, and we have the mapping up from 180. That's also an option.
That was going to be my question, and that's sort of why I asked where that requirement sort of fell, whether it's in site plan or conditional use. Our process we've been working through, Emily, with finding applications complete and then scheduling public hearings. I know we've been doing it in this fashion. It's been working out well. In a scenario like this, in such a large project, if the board creates a motion for application of site plan and conditional use separately and finds one complete and maybe not the other, is there an opportunity to schedule a site walk, ideally receive the information prior to the next meeting, and then have continued discussion on the site plan, review the application for completeness for conditional use, let's say, and continue discussion on the project? Or is that, do we need to have another meeting?
I think you could just do a site walk if you wanted to, if that's where we're going, if you want to schedule a site walk. If you start doing one application gets a completeness and the other doesn't get completeness finding, then we're gonna have like different hearing nights and stuff, so it's better to keep them on the same
That's what I.
path, yeah. Is that what you mean? Yeah.
That's what I want to confirm, that the process is, we still want them to run simultaneously, and we don't want to get the cart before the horse. Yes, Jim?
Mr. Chairman, I'm just looking at the site plan review submission requirements checklist. And if I'm understanding it, I'm just looking at the checklist to see where that, the 20-inch tree requirement comes in. I mean, there's certainly, requirements for landscaping, buffering plan showing what will remain and what will be planted, including botanical and common names for plants and trees and stuff. All that seems to be tied to, creating landscaping on a lot. It doesn't necessarily speak to the requirement in section 180 of the ordinance having to do with 20-inch trees. I mean, both of those submission requirements for an application seem to be maybe a little more general and not specifically related to that section of the ordinance. So my point is that maybe it isn't that for all the reasons we've already discussed, it would be very important to have a tree survey and just to know what's there and so what can be there later. But for the purposes of the application completeness, if this checklist, if the little descriptors are accurate, they're not, that's not required for application completeness. That's certainly a standard that has to be met for the application to be ultimately approved, but not for completeness. Does that make sense to anyone? I mean, look at the checklist and see if you see anything there that talks about, 20-inch trees for remediation of the site later. It's all talking about landscaping, and it's for proposals that are going to be creating landscaping on a site, like some of the other proposals we've seen tonight, where they're proposing to disturb the land, and then they're going to build something, and then they're going to plant trees around it to have a certain landscaping plan in place. I don't think that is really what this is all about, and I'm not sure that particular provision of the ordinance is unless I'm reading it wrong, that's not necessarily tied to the application completeness.
Yeah, that's where I was asking Emily to confirm. So for site plan, you're correct. It's that piece of criteria falls under the conditional use review within chapter 180 in that section. So that's a little bit further down that checklist, PDF page 10. It's noted document page 5. So that's where it falls under the conditional use piece. So that's where I was sort of alluding to with Emily is the application. That's where Joyce had her comment from. So, Jeff.
I guess they're all valid points. And, you know, Ms. Cole Prescott brought up a good point. Let's not get the two applications off queue. I don't see the harm. I don't think any, I mean, there's not a huge opposition to this. Why can't we leave it as, you know, a non-complete application, schedule our site walk, and then that way, when we come back, they gives them their time to do their inventory. We've got the site walk. Anybody from the public would have been able to join that site walk and observe, and we can have the next meeting, everything gets summarized and accepted, and then we can post our public hearing, the following meeting. We're kind of at a standstill now, but I mean, we don't want to, my intent wasn't to hold this up. It's just that they need a little time to get their inventory done, and that is one of our requirements that we're supposed to be checking off, is that requirement was fulfilled for the conditional use. And so, I mean, I would be fine saying the site plan is acceptable, it's complete, but if it's going to make it more difficult for Emily, because now we've got two different applications, let's just leave it at that, and let's go ahead and move to have a site walk, and then hopefully we can wrap up the completeness at the next meeting after they meet their time, their posting notice for the site walk.
Thank you, Jeff. Emily, does our ordinance allow us to table continued review of the application of completeness, request the existing vegetation survey, and schedule a public hearing for a date and take up the old business of review of the application, make a finding on it, and then continue? Or do we need to, I suppose if we don't make a finding, then that following agenda item wouldn't continue, of course. But I know we've changed some of our procedures of how we kind of go through this, but previously we would review an application, find it complete, and then we would continue that review the same evening.
Yep. So you have a few options. You can either A, find the applications complete, and then we would just kind of go through the site walk, scheduling, everything else. B, we can do exactly what you're saying. You can just continue the application review pending the plan about the tree mapping or tree inventory to the next meeting. And we can host a site walk, and you can schedule a site walk. We can do our best to accommodate scheduling in the interim. But I would say usually Lisa sends notices out, so we need 7 days, 8 days, Lisa. So we could do that. If we're going to be noticing a hearing, I just want to make sure that we have clear guidance for the applicant on what they should be coming back with, because when we go into noticing a hearing, we're talking about timelines that have to be met and when is that date happening, and so there's a little more detail that needs to be worked out.
Absolutely.
And to be clear, we're not requesting the landscape or the tree count, but a methodology, a plan for that, correct? I mean, before our next meeting, we're not telling them, go out and count all the trees. We're telling them to come back with a plan on how they would address that issue.
Well, I guess my understanding there would be the applicant would come back and provide us a better understanding as to the existing vegetation out there. This node or this area is mostly X, Y, Z. It has large caliper trees. It has small caliper trees, so on. I think some sort of additional information on that condition, I think, is the intent.
Yeah, I thought, I labeled it as a vegetation survey in my notes, that the applicant would have a vegetation survey available for us, and we'd be able to make a determination on completeness of the application.
When you say a vegetation survey, are you telling them that you want to know where every 20-inch tree is?
No, an overall snapshot of what the existing conditions are on the property as far as vegetation is concerned, the types of
When's the
vegetation.
next meeting? 2 weeks? Yeah, that's
Yeah, April
going to be hard
2nd.
to do, I got to figure.
The next meeting that they're on the agenda for, they're not necessarily on the agenda for the next.
Okay,
Well, if it gets continued tonight, they would probably be on for
the
April
next
2nd.
one, yeah.
Unless you specify a date out.
Well, we talk about the 16th in our packet here. So if the 16th, today's the 19th, if the board finds the application is complete, then we've found, and Emily and staff supports, that the application and the project is ready to go for a public hearing. So if we're saying, as a board, that the one item we're looking for is existing vegetation, if that can be provided by the April 16th meeting, we continue the application review, we find it complete. That same evening is a scheduled public hearing. I mean, that's sort of what we're potentially getting at. True?
Okay, now I understand. So you'd want everything to go forward kind of like with using the old process.
For this particular
Okay.
instance, that's sort of my thought process, because I haven't read anything through here that says there are outstanding items that staff is looking for. There's any other information that staff at least is looking for. The board needs to have discussion and talk more about it, but staff, for the most part, on this one, it's such a significant project. It's been ongoing for so long. It seems that it's pretty darn satisfied, less this one piece. So
Right.
that was sort of my.
Right, we wouldn't have them come back just to say, okay, we've got this one thing, now you're complete, now come back again. And in the past, we've done this where we've determined that an application is complete as step one, and then we do our review the same evening.
Immediately following that determination. Yeah, that was sort of, that was my question.
Okay,
That's where I was going with it.
so you would like the applicant to return on April 16th for application completeness review finding, continued review finding, and scheduled public hearing. And then I'm thinking in the interim, you want to host a site walk as well. Is that what we're looking to do?
Before that April 16th meeting, yes.
Okay.
Except I think the applicant might have something to say about it, because he's been very patient, but he obviously has something to say.
Yeah, I was going to say, if we can move forward this way, we'll find a forester to go out and cruise that site before the next meeting.
Well, that's what I was hoping we would say.
Yeah.
Well, that's, I mean, to Jeff's point, creating that baseline and creating that understanding to make sure moving forward, and I think otherwise the board and staff seem content with everything in here. So if you can get that schedule, that, I guess my intent would to keep the schedule that we have, clearly with this anticipated date of April 16th. Emily and staff had made provisions and made that date available pending, obviously, tonight's decision, but I think we'd like to continue that timeframe and schedule.
So if I can, Mr. Chair, when would we be hosting the site walk as far as when schedules allow?
What is everyone doing tomorrow?
That's a big field tomorrow.
Not having a site walk?
I tease. I think when the board is and the applicant has availability, I'm not sure we can work on scheduling that right now. I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Weekends work for board members or week evenings. I know we're still fighting daylight a little bit, but does the board have any preference? Staff?
I was thinking Monday, April 1st or Wednesday, April 3rd.
Monday the 1st or April the 3rd? I would support April the 3rd over the 1st. Personally, the 3rd works better for me, personally, but Jeff, the 3rd?
Third.
Rob says the 3rd, Joyce 3rd, Jim? Jim 3rd. Wednesday, April 3rd, if that works for the applicant.
Sure. What time?
Do you have a particular time that works that you prefer, Emily? 5, I'm not sure.
Yeah, 4:30.
4:30.
Yeah.
So let's say 4:30 on April 3rd. And we'll meet on site at the entrance to the Pickard Pit off of New County Road, I suspect.
Yep.
April 3rd. And I guess from the applicant, I think we'll take your lead as to sort of how that psych walk perhaps goes. I think for me particularly, Deputy Fire Chief isn't here anymore, but looking through some of those contours and some of the slopes on the road, I think was pretty interesting. The Fire Chief knows his apparatus better than I do, but some of the numbers seem steep. But, so I think curious about that, and then obviously the general area of some of the nodes. I don't think anyone's looking to walk 165 acres, but, okay, so that's good.
So just a clarification, Mr. Chair. So we'll meet right off New County Road, right at the Pickard Pit?
Yes, sir.
Okay. In their parking lot? That's great. I could bring my truck if we need it.
All right, so with that,
So, Mr. Chair, I move to table this application to April 16th.
yes.
The next meeting is April 2nd, right? So this is the April 16th meeting.
April 16th. April 16th, so
I think
Joyce.
is that the meeting that this was anticipated to be?
So
Yeah.
Joyce's motion to table application of completeness review to April 16th, scheduling a site walk for April 3rd at 4:30 PM, and scheduling a public hearing for April 16th. Is that sort of all encompassing?
Yes,
I'll second
the
that.
meeting, yes.
I just didn't know if you were going to do a couple motions.
No,
Okay.
one is sufficient, thank you.
Okay. Motion made by Joyce, seconded by Jim. Any additional discussion? Those in favor, Jim?
Yes?
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. All right. Is that everything, Emily? On that covers us?
Yes, thank you.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks.
Moving on, Emily, any general correspondences this evening?
We just had received the email that I think many of you already got from Kelly Archer about the meeting packet. So I already went over that earlier.
All right, thank you. That we did receive that. Any planning board department updates or any discussions?
We just have projects under review, a lot of projects under review right now, so we're working through those. They're all on our webpage. Looking forward to the downtown gateway project that we talked about, that Pat Fox did some presentation on earlier today. I would anticipate seeing an amendment in the future from the Saco Island East developers to follow up on that downtown plan gateway project. And we'll have a full agenda at the next meeting as well.
All right, thank you. I believe Long Range Planning Committee, we have that document that you provided us. I think just as a reminder, I believe you're looking for some notes or comments, hopefully by our next April 2nd meeting.
Yes, thank you. That's a good reminder. And we'll look to finish that up. I can pull it up on the screen and put notes right in it like we do for our reports. And then the housekeeping ordinance amendments passed with council last night. So they adopted the draft that was in the meeting packet, last night's meeting packet. So if you have any questions about that.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other items from planning board members or communications? No? All right, it is 10:02 PM and we'll adjourn.